Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to call this meeting of the Board of Finance of the Town of Andover to order at 7 p.m. Wednesday, March 24th. We'll say the Pledge of Allegiance to start. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America
and to the republic which it
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Going to our agenda, the second item is public speak. And do we have anybody who would like to speak publicly? We have members of the public, or at least non-board members attending. So Amanda, you want to go around?
Okay, so first non-member we have, well, it looks like Adrian is raising his hand. Would you like to go first?
You're muted, Adrian. Okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to take a minute. We went through the budget over at the Board of Selectmen, and I know you guys are going through it now. And I believe it's important for you guys to have your own process. But I do say I'm a little frustrated with some of the things that the school is putting forward that you guys, I don't know if you haven't pushed back on or maybe just weren't aware of, but it's a little frustrating to me watching it. So I just want to highlight a couple things. First of all, we looked at other schools, regionally, and other schools are saying that, because they were out of school for quite a bit of time, the year before and last year, that their supply closets didn't get used, so they actually needed less money in supply. But I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing, my biggest concern is really this kindergarten situation where we're being told that there's this COVID gap and we need the money for COVID because of this gap. We reached out to other schools again, and nobody else is doing this. This is just an outlier that our school is doing. And I think the biggest frustration is we're not even talking about small class sizes. We're looking at ridiculously small class sizes. 10 kids to a class, never mind 10 kids with a para, even just if it was 10 kids to a class, is too low. And that one line item is $100,000. And I get that our superintendent wants to curry favor with the teachers by pushing this I'm not going to lay anyone off thing and I'm going to protect the teachers. That's great. I get it. That's her job. But our job is to look at the bottom line numbers and say, is that enough to do the job that you need to do to educate these kids? And unfortunately, it's more than it needs to be. I support the school getting an increase to cover their contractual increases. And I support some of the other things that are in that budget. But I certainly cannot support our town paying for 10 kids to a class, never mind 10 kids to a class with paras. It's just nuts. So that's a big frustration to me. And I think I was a little concerned when I hear you guys talking a lot. I don't hear a lot of motions being made. I wish you guys would sort of move some of this stuff forward. And I think the other thing I would encourage you is that, if you don't believe what I'm saying, please don't. Call other districts, look at other districts' budgets and say, yeah, that really doesn't add up. You don't have to take my word for it. Look and see what's out there, And last but not least, you guys, I'm going a little long here. I'm sorry. You guys are going to be looking at the community center. We supported it from the town selectman side. I actually drew up the plans and the prints, and unfortunately, I didn't get asked to come on the meeting. I would have done it for you. But if you watch the selectmen's meeting, and I'm going to ask Amanda if you could pull out the section where we walked people through, maybe put that as a separate video. That might be helpful to people, so they don't have to sift through a 2-hour meeting to find it. But we did an actual walkthrough so you can see the space and see what we're proposing. We're trying to build this as economically as possible, so that we don't need a lot of resources beyond what we've put away. We think we're more than halfway there with the money that we have put aside. So, we think this is something that's doable. This has been on the table since 1969. And we think this is something the community does need, so, take the 100K from the third class and put it towards a community center. The school has had its run of the budget for way too long. This idea that, the school budget hasn't gone down in 6 years. No one ever says after that, by the way, the population has gone down 36% in those same 6 years. So no, your budget hasn't gone up when it should have actually been going down. And it didn't do that either. So at any rate, I'll let you guys do your meeting, enjoy, and hopefully you guys can make some progress. Have a good night.
All right, thanks, Adrian.
Thank you, Adrian. Sherry Holmes?
I'm good at this time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ed Srisley? You're muted.
Okay, am I here?
You're here.
Okay, thank you. I'm here for two reasons. Answer later in the agenda, answer any questions on my committee's work on the community center. And number two, as a public speak, I'd like to add on to what Adrian was just saying. My two boys made out just fine and doing well in life. And when in the 90s, they went to Andover Elementary. Typical faculty to faculty ratios were 23, 25 to 1. Certainly, if we go back to my dinosaur times, I had 23, 25 people in my elementary school when I went to school. But just as little as 20 years ago, the faculty student ratio was 20 to 1. And to have 10 to 1 at half that now, it's just frustrating to me as a taxpayer in this town that we are so unbalanced. We have many community needs, including the building we'll talk about, that's been on our agenda for 40 years or 50 years in 5 consecutive plans of development. And to see everyone else in the town but the school children not being taken care of from a community standpoint is really sad in my opinion. So I'd like to thank the Board of Finance for the tough job they do. I know it's all about balancing issues and balancing needs of the town. And I think it's time we had a reset to be more balanced. And so I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Scott Person, would you like to participate?
Yes, just a few short comments. I share Adrian's sentiments with the AES budget also. There's been a lot of information shared with the Board of Education, Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen that Jeff Murray has brought on board. And I think all that information needs to be shared with the public as well as our board so that we can come up with a good budget this year. That's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Jay Kamens?
Hello, folks. How you doing? Let me start my video here. Hello. I'm just here to kind of take advantage of the fact that these meetings are on Zoom now. So I have nothing to say other than I'm just here to learn a little bit more about the budget process in the town. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Glad you're here. Okay, Diane Grenier?
No, I'm all set. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thanks, Diane. Joanne Hebert?
Amanda, thank you. I just want to piggyback too. I'll keep it short. I provide I send out a lot of emails and information and to back up what we're trying to do with just keeping the educational budgets, to where they should be. Last night I shared things about RAM, so I know we're not here to discuss them. This is Andover, but I put my money where my mouth is. I speak up wherever I can and try to be fair, try to be thoughtful, try to be polite. Just point out a couple facts. The one thing that I want to counter that's very important that I hear that brings up a lot.
Joanne, we're having a little hard time hearing you.
Okay.
It keeps going in and out.
I hate this computer. That's telling me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So one important fact that I hear Valerie bring up a lot, that if we don't keep the numbers down, we'll pay for it in the future. What I want to say say from my own experience again, is that children are screened early, whether they go to preschool or not, by people in the town. At one point, my daughter was caught early with a little speech thing. So again, that was caught when she wasn't even in the school system by services that are provided, and it was taken care of. I think she had some speech services, one of my children in kindergarten, and she was done. So I just, I kind of wanted to counter that thought that if we don't do this, we're going to pay for it down the line. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Okay, Jeff Murray.
I'm all set, thanks.
Okay, is that everyone?
I think so. Looks like it. Okay, thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. Duly noted. And we do have a lot to consider. I know, just want to point out, I know both Joanne and Jeff Murray and others have sent a lot of emails. I know I personally haven't had a chance to even review them in almost any level of detail. That they will get reviewed, and I think there's a lot of important points there. We all know that, so we'll continue as we go through this. It's a tough situation, and we have a job to do, and we'll get it done. So, thanks, guys. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 3, additions and deletions of the agenda. Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda? I'm going to go ahead and make a motion myself because I'm aware of one. We should discuss the Board of Finance representative to the Capital Improvements Planning Committee. Louise is going to resign her position or her participation in that committee. She feels like it would be better served having somebody a little more, I think she used the word technical than she is. So we'll take it at that. So if we could add that to the agenda, I would suggest, I would move that we add to the agenda the item to consider a replacement for Louise Goodwin on the Capital Improvements Committee to, I guess this would be 8. I'm going to suggest we move it to 8G and move the budget discussion to 8H. Okay. Anybody want to second that motion?
I'll
Sure.
second that.
Okay, I think Rob got it first on my
Okay. Quicker than me, Rob.
Rob seconds the motion. Is there any discussion over making that agenda change? Okay, let's vote on it. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. So we'll add that to the agenda as item 8G and move the budget discussion to 8H. Okay. Thank you. Any other additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to item 4, which is the town administrator's report. Eric?
How we doing, folks? Amanda, can I share my screen here? Do I have the power?
You've got the power.
Excellent. Hang
Go
on.
ahead.
Okay, can everybody see that? I usually start with showing the COVID update. As you know, we had been in town rapidly decreasing our total caseload. We peaked out at around 75, and that was cases per day per 100,000 residents, averaged over a 14-day moving window. So by about a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago, we had got down to a really low number, and then the last week or so, we've started creeping back up, and we're pretty consistently getting cases every day or two identified within the town. So my suspicion is, even though a lot of people are getting vaccinated, people are slacking off a little bit, number one, and number two, we're starting to get bit by some of the variants that are a little bit more transmissible than the original version of COVID. So no time to relax just yet. So again, I'm just going to go over like normal the things that have been changed or I really want to highlight. In the finance office, I just want to say we're marching along towards completion of the audit. We've had a bunch of discussions between the chair, the finance director, the auditor, and myself. So we're cracking away at that, which is good. We hope to have a final audit in about a month, or within a month. So the next thing up on the assessor's office, many of you have probably seen the information that's gone out. We are starting to do the second half of the audit, which is interior inspections. You can decline if you so desire. You know, COVID, concerns over COVID is a perfectly valid reason to say, you know what, I'm really not comfortable with people in my house. But the way it works is that it's our turn to do what's called a full measure and list. And by law, we have to ask and we have to try to get into the house and complete the information. But people have every right to say no. And if the answer is no, that's fine. We'll do the best job we can with the information we have and move on. So that's what's going on with that. Most of you know at this point that the building department admin person quit suddenly. And so that's caused us a little bit of issues temporarily. Amanda is subbing in the building office, but that is a union position. What the town is negotiating right now with the union to do is to combine that position with the assistant town clerk to make one combined position between the two, which will net some pretty significant savings to the town. So we've had a couple meetings with the union to discuss the consolidation. If we're going to do it, we're going to have to at the same time put in an electronic permitting system because we're reducing the total time available and we're going to have to make ourselves more efficient if we're going to make this work without inconveniencing the public. And so we can talk about that a little bit later. I sent everybody on the commission the contract or a proposed contract from Permit Link. So I have looked at a couple of vendors. You know, there's really only two vendors that are commonly used in this area. Permit Link is the El Cheapo one. And there's a better vendor out there, but it's more than double the cost for, and there's a big initial startup cost for implementation, which Permit Link doesn't have. So my recommendation is we go with Permit Link. That will accomplish what we need. And we're also going to turn around and what Permit Link will do is allow us to just be billed per the number of permits pulled. And then we simply pay for it by tacking on a fee to each permit. And the other advantage is it'll allow people to pay electronically. So it's much faster on the part of an applicant, and it's more convenient in the sense that they can be sitting on their Barco lounger with a beer at 11:30 at night, submitting their permit to the town. So we're working on updating those two. If we're going to do it, I think the Board of Finance needs to review and be on board with us implementing the software also. And we can talk about that maybe a little bit later.
Eric, how many permits do we issue? What's our volume?
Not a lot. So the building department alone issues in the low 300s per year. So it's not a great deal of permits.
Okay.
But there's a lot more work than just instant issuing permits. I mean, whoever's in that position still answers an awful lot of questions and has an awful lot of interactions with other departments. So it's not like, you know, you issue one permit a day and then you go take a nap either. I'm not trying to, say that by any means. We have done reasonably well. We've had a little bit more than average plowable events lately, but we had a big gap in the middle where we had no plowable events. So far, we've spent about 45 grand in salt, but we have a stockpile right now. We are probably going to spend the remaining 15,000 in the salt budget and stock away as much as we can. There's unfortunately going to be a really big vendor shortage next year because the state of Connecticut just threw out one of the major distributors, threw them off the pier in New London and said they couldn't bring salt in by barge anymore because they want to use that spot, to stockpile equipment for an offshore wind project. So all of a sudden, everybody in the state is scrambling to figure out where they're going to get their salt. And we're paying right now low 60s, $64, $65 a ton. Most municipalities that are getting salt right now, that have one of the vendors that got kicked out are paying, over $100. So we would anticipate next year, we're going to end up spending more per ton on salt. We're trying to stockpile now. So F550, we did get the vehicle. It's in with the correct dump body on it, and we got the plow installed. They gave us the wrong plow. We had to send it back and get another plow, but minor details. Anyway, it's in the shop and functioning and being used now. And the other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is the alarm monitoring. We are going to have an initial capital expense to get our alarm systems functioning. Depending on how much information you want, I can send you all the quotes and everything from all the vendors, if all of you want to go through it. But our basic problem is that, we've added these systems over the years. Like every system we have came from a different manufacturer. So we have got little to no commonality, and several of our systems really don't work. We don't have any system in the museum currently that functions. The alarm system for Public Works really is not functional or very marginally functional. So we're looking at 2 buildings. We're probably going to replace almost completely the alarm systems. The rest of the buildings just need monitoring. So I've gotten 4 quotes at this point. I've gone back to all the vendors and asked them for additional information to fill in and make the quotes as common as possible. One of the advantages we're going to be able to do is get away from using our copper phone lines to monitor. And we're either going to go cellular or we're going to go with a VHF relay system. Because we're paying, $35 a month, $36 a month for each copper line. And a lot of these systems require a primary and secondary. So right now, even though we're getting the monitoring for free, we're paying $70 a month for the phone lines. So in the end, it's not going to be a big long-term cost increase to the town. In fact, it may be close to cost neutral to what we're paying now, but we're going to end up spending some capital to get the systems to they actually function. And the other thing I would really like to do is I would like to start building in the cost for annual maintenance, because in most of our buildings, we haven't really done annual maintenance. I know in this town, the last time the system was maintained was 5 years ago. And we had some issues with it when I brought the contractor in this year to examine it. So hopefully by next month, I will have more information, and I'm hoping to present to CIP a completed set of applications as well as a recommendation. I would assume that Board of Finance would want to look at and confer, because it would be a long-term contract for the monitoring. And then you would also need to approve the capital if you chose to do so. So I'm hoping to have that for you in about a month, because we're losing our monitoring by TN, the dispatch center, basically around July 1st. So we got to get our act together fairly quickly. And the last thing, as many of you have probably seen, but the Board of Selectmen made 2 motions at their last meeting. The first was to support upgrades to Veterans Monument Park to the tune of about $20,000 in funding. And they passed that unanimously, but didn't really pick a funding source about where they wanted to take it. We have a couple options, but I actually would like to get a little more information before I send it back to you to make a motion on where to take the funds. I can offer up 2 or 3 possibilities, but I think I want a little more information from the auditor before I say where I want to actually recommend that we take the money, because it's money that's not really budgeted. The second thing is that they moved to authorize spending up to $50,000 to move along the process of completing a community center. And the location would be directly behind the town hall. And we've been doing some of the kind of background work for that. We had the septic system completely inspected and marked out. So, because we didn't really have good as-built for that. So we have that now. We got that done today. We've also located the major drain line there. So we're chunking away getting information, and we've got a request to the surveyor that originally surveyed the property for the last edition of the community room to see whether we can obtain that survey directly from the architect. So what they're asking for is the authorization to spend up to $50,000 for the site survey and eventually full construction drawings for an architectural firm and renderings. But what they would like to do is do it staged, which is initially get the property resurveyed so they know where everything is, and get the site engineering done, and then a set of preliminary drawings. So that's enough to bring back to the community and then say, this is what we're proposing. Do you all agree with it? What changes would you make before we go to full, architectural, architectural construction drawings? So that is what the Board of Selectmen has recommended doing, but that would also take a motion by the Board of Finance to push that along if you were in agreement with it. And that is all I have for my report, unless you have specific questions for me, or general questions, I guess.
I'll just point out that the contract for the automated building system is actually going to be, it's another agenda item, so we'll discuss that separately. So, as well, if Dan had asked some questions about the number of building permits, but I think we can also add more there. Anything else for Eric? Okay, hearing none, thank you. We'll move on to the next item, the Finance Department report. I actually don't know that I said this before. On behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome Sherry Holmes as our Finance Director. We're very happy to have you on board, and probably not as happy as Eric is, but quite happy to have you join, and welcome to the town of Andover.
Thank you.
Okay. So Eric, I don't know, is this going to be you or is Sherry going to go through this?
I think we can kind of both talk about it. What I'm going to suggest is, we hold off until next month to do requests for over expenditure, because next month will be after April 1st, and we can start potentially addressing some of the interdepartmental changes, budgets that needed to be adjusted. We're over 21 or 22 line items total for the town, which isn't too bad considering we've got, I don't know, 500, line items total. Okay, we're doing fairly well financially. We're still under budget overall. So I don't foresee any major issues with the budget. There are definitely some areas we're over. I can discuss them with you if you're like. If, just kind of depends what you want at this point. If I'd had a little more time, I'd have given you all the requests for over expenditures, but frankly, I just ran out of time getting them.
Is there anything that's got the potential to go over by department? I mean, I'm not that worried about the line items as long as the overall budget is coming within that department. Is there anything that's approaching where we may have an issue?
Yeah, that will go over on a department level budget. The tax collector's office will go over on the budget line item for tax collector. And that is basically salary driven. We had anticipated reducing the hours of that position earlier in the year. And frankly, I got started on that, and it's taken me a long time to grind that through and get a memorandum of understanding with the union. So we've done it now, and that change will affect the budget permanently from here on out. But we didn't do it as early in the year as we anticipated. So we definitely will go over that department budget because that department budget is, 85% of it is the salary line item for one individual. So that one will go over. And mowing and ground care, we're going to go over. And we're going to go over basically because we had a major problem with the well pump and the electrical to the well pump. And, that was like an $18,000 budget that was fairly close to what we were going to actually expend. But the well pump itself, at the end of the day, was a $7,500 repair. So that budget in ground care is pretty much just one item. So that one's going to be out of that department too. That, as far as I know, should be about the only place where we're going to bust a budget department, the whole department.
How about Public Works? Did you mention that today with that?
Yeah, we're gonna definitely bust a couple items in Public Works, but the budget overall should be okay.
Okay.
I gave to the Board of Finance a while back an over expenditure request for both overtime for Public Works as well as the temporary hire position. So you've already approved it, and I don't think we certainly haven't exceeded the new limits. The total salary for Public Works will probably be a little over if you take the regular salary plus overtime plus plus temporary, but it shouldn't be over by more than what we have left in the budget for overtime for snow removal. For salary overall, we should be okay. Close, but okay. So yeah, that should be fine.
Good.
Any other questions or anything any of you are really concerned with in terms of the budget?
Not for me. And Diane asked the question I was essentially going to ask, and I think she put it better. So thank you. Any other questions for Eric? Okay, so we will move on, I guess, to then we're jumping over A, B, C, and D. They're all part of that general detail we normally get into in a budget or a normal Board of Finance meeting. We'll move on to item 6, budget transfers. Eric, do you have any or no? Is that?
No, I would like to wait until next month because now because we'll be in the last quarter, we have a little bit more flexibility about what we can do in terms of moving money.
Right.
Okay, a little more certainty. Okay, so I guess we'll move on to item 7, which is old business. COVID-19 update. Eric, I guess you provided that already. Do you have anything more to add?
I don't have anything more unless you guys have specific questions for me. Hopefully you're all in line to get vaccinated at some point.
Let's all hope. And the finance director position, we can probably take this off of the agenda going forward.
Yep.
Terry? Yeah. Okay. Software transition. This has been on hold, and we anticipate keeping this on hold for the time being.
I think Sherry can probably give you an update on the status of that.
Okay.
Currently, right now, we're contacting Edmonds. I talked to the tech person yesterday from EastCon. He reached out to Edmonds as well, Brian Adams. And basically what he was told, they're just waiting for a date of implementation. And it's really on the ball's in their court right now. I did say that I had some concerns about that because I would like to see this implemented for July 1st. I don't want to work with Phoenix one more day than I have to, believe me. And since it should have been done probably a year ago, I mean, let's get it done. So I expressed my concerns about that because one of the things they have to work with us on is a chart of accounts for the town. In order to get both the town and the school into play, we have to create a structure, an account structure that's long enough to encompass both of the entities, if you would. And it would be like the town would be a separate fund from the school, as would be a separate fund for the grants and indicating town and school as well. So that structure needs to be accommodating enough for both town and school. And they need to work with me on that one. So he did say that that is on his list of things to do. And I said, well, I'm available whenever you want to start working on that. And I'm drafting right now a template and putting together a chart of accounts that I feel that we can use for the town. The chart of accounts is already in place and it's good shape on the school side. So I'm confident with that one, but moving forward, the town chart of accounts has to be done. And I think I have a pretty good idea that I just need help implementing. That's all.
The chart of accounts is not going to be common between the two, or the overall structure is
As
going to be
common as it can be.
Okay.
There are a lot of accounts that the town has that the school doesn't have.
Right.
So it's going to be basically where it's going to be commonality is the object codes.
Okay.
Pretty much. You know, salaries, benefits, those kind of things. You'll see some common ground, but there's other things that the town deals with that the school does not. So, you know, I'm going to try to get it as uniform as I can possibly get it. And we'll create a crosswalk between the two so that everybody's, you know, on board with easily identifying all the accounts.
I have one question. I saw we made some changes in the budget work spreadsheet that Eric did this year to put the benefit costs within the department level so we can actually see what each department is. Are we we're going to continue that practice going forward, correct?
Yes, correct.
The budget one lump sum. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, that's not a problem. We can continue to do that.
So do we have any, so the ball's in their court if they're dragging their feet or anything, do we have anything in the contract where there's performance deadlines or things like that? Or is it kind of like a wide open contract? It's not, do we have anything to hold their feet to the fire with? Because obviously we want to get this done for July 1st. I agree with you.
I have requested a copy of that contract so I could take a look at it.
Okay.
And see if there's anything that I can, you know, capture, like, and call them back and say, hey, you promised us this and X. It's in your contract. So let's get going.
If they work on the account, chart of accounts with you, that gets the ball rolling. And
yes, it does.
Okay.
I would say in their defense, not that I'm defending any vendor, but we were the holdup for a long period of time. I mean, we signed the contract and then we basically said, you know what? We don't have a finance director. We don't want to move forward and do a chart of accounts until we had one. So, you know, I admit that we own most of the delay up to this point. From here on out, it's on the vendor, but up to
Right,
now.
I'm just looking for them to be cooperative with us and to get it going, because yes, I'm sure the delay is on our side, but we didn't have the people in play to make it happen, so. I just want
Understood.
them to work with us, you know?
Right, I did email them on the point person at Edmonds, and I gave him all my information and credentials, and he was supposed to get in touch with me as far as setting up that date.
Right.
So I will certainly keep on top of it, and I will also talk with the superintendent, as I've talked with Eric today about it as well.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Any other questions for Sherry on the software transition? I share Diane's concerns. Anytime I hear somebody say it's on my list of things to do, I'm like, well, I have a list like that too. And
That means we're at the bottom of the list.
well, it may or may not, but it doesn't mean a whole lot else. So
No,
just means you're on the list. So, okay, thanks.
thank you.
All
I have
right.
a pretty long list too. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And, nobody wants to be number 437, at least on my list. Okay. Item 7, old business audit status, 7D. Eric, you mentioned this briefly earlier. Do you want to kind of fill us in on where we are?
Yeah, we're chunking away at the audit. We've got some preliminary data back from the audit, but it's still pretty preliminary. So I'm not sure we want to really take much action on it. We did talk to Mike, the auditor, today. Sherry and I did, and he seems pretty confident that as long as we get the was it OPBM?
Yeah, Hooker and Holcomb, it's a GASB valuation report. Hopefully we've already done it, and it's just a matter of getting him a copy, but if we haven't, then we gotta, light a fire under Hooker and Holcomb to get that to him. It's pretty typical what needs to happen now, so we'll work on that and make sure that he gets what he needs.
Yeah. So hopefully in a month or so, we'll have a final audit to look at. I realize we're running a bit late, but again, being honest, a big chunk of that delay was ours.
A little positive note to that. I found out today that the point person for the audit is actually a gentleman that I've worked with before in East Granby. So we do have a relationship and we work well together. So that's I think a positive note. He's more willing to work with us and to work with me. So he was pretty excited to find out that I was here. So we'll see.
I don't think he liked your predecessor here. I will admit that those two struggled to get along.
Yeah.
Well, that's good news. Good. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on the audit? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to number 8, old business. I'm sorry, new business. The first agenda item under new business is 8A, review the AHM fiscal year 21-22 budget. We did have some discussion about this last meeting. I don't think this has changed. Am I correct?
Correct. So I can fill you in. So the question at the last meeting was if the town is increasing their share of the total expense, did it used to be just the town and the elementary school or just the town and RAM or both? And I couldn't answer that. So actually, let me share my screen again.
This is part of the packet too, I'm assuming anyway, with the screen probably they're going to show, just to make everybody aware that it is in the packet, as was the budget report. So.
Yeah, so you should have that. We had a meeting today with all the superintendents and AHM and discussed this. So basically what's The major change, which you guys should have already been aware of, is that we have started billing for AHM almost completely through the town, as opposed to, it used to be the town paid one portion, the school paid one portion, RAM paid one portion. Now it's 100% the town, other than Andover Elementary School and a couple of the other schools have separate agreements for additional support, which they pay for directly. So there will still be some funding for AHM in the school's budget, but the school's budget will be reduced by around $23,000, $24,000, because that portion will be paid for by the town. But the town's portion of the bill is actually going down this year. It was, I think it's about $4,000 cheaper this year than last year, something like that. And that's because we changed the formula for figuring out how much each town respectively contributes. It used to be just based on RAM enrollment. Now it's based on a combination of census profile and secondarily on enrollment for K through 12. So that total number. So the good news is that for us means a reduction. So we pay less this year than last year, but it appears in the town's portion of the budget, not in the town and the school's budget. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, does that RAM piece that was paid directly by RAM come off the RAM budget now? Is it already out of their budget?
Yes, we had that confusion on the parts of numbers of superintendents, but we've all settled on the fact that all the superintendents will remove that money from all of their budgets. And it goes on all the town's budgets by contract.
So have we adjusted that number in your latest spreadsheet that you sent out?
I did, yes.
Okay, so you
Yes.
took that 22,000
Correct.
off the RAM budget amount.
Yeah, correct. And I took it off the town's budget, the budget we had from AES
For the school.
also.
For the school gets-
Eric,
okay.
did you take only 22,171 out?
It looked like it was
They
more
had-
than
they had
that. so I
actually-
just-
The school had actually budgeted more like 28,000, so the entire 28,000 ought to come out. And we
but
can
then
work it out
the
later.
provide us with a new number then.
Yeah, I mean, I did not get new actual numbers from either RAM or from Andover Elementary School. I had a conversation with both. So I took out approximately the right number within, a few $1,000s, but what the exact number is, I don't really know yet. I'm not saying what I sent you is absolute final. There's a bunch of things in here I don't know, completely for sure.
Well, I would ask that the school give us that final new number, because from what I could see that they had put $50,000 in there for everything. And so I think they over budgeted what the actual expense was. So I just want to make sure we got the right number, so we're dealing with the correct numbers.
Right.
Yeah, I think Diane is right, and you're right, Diane. I said 28,000, but it was 48,000 something. I think that they had budgeted for AHM, not realizing as we did
Right. Okay.
update that as well.
I can do that, certainly.
If I
Thanks,
can
Sherry.
say something, in the elementary school budget, they do have their own contracted services
Right,
from AHM in addition to the
right.
23,000. So,
The social worker.
right.
That's a separate line item on the budget, so it's pretty clear what needs to be
Okay.
removed. So, yeah, and then Valerie had indicated that in one of her mails that that would stay, but the other AHM budget item would be removed.
Mhm.
Over to the town side, right?
Yep. Yeah, if you look on the bottom of what I'm sharing for my screen, it shows that amount, the additional service agreements that the school had with AHM to provide additional services. So, but that varies from year to year, which is why that's not built into the overall, operating budget of AHM. Because so a school can decide they want more time than that, less time than that, whatever, and then they just sign a contract for that number of hours, and go. Does that make sense?
I guess, Sherry, from your point is just to check that, because I'm assuming this 21,106 is last year's contract with them. I don't know if our services increased on the social worker.
No, I think that's moving forward, what they have in their budget for next year. They plan on this contract.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll double check it.
All right.
So does anybody on the Board of Finance, so we know we're gonna have to, myself and Linda are both on, for lack of a better term, the Board of Directors for AHM in our roles in the town. Does anybody on the Board of Selectmen have any heartburn for us? Normally the CEO of the town, which would be me, signs the, the AHM, budget proposal and votes on it. Do any of you have any objection to us agreeing to that at this point? And just so that you know, their overall budget is about a 3% increase, but it's a decrease. Our percentage of it is a decrease. So overall, our bill is going down.
Right, we're just moving it around where it shows. That's basically how we're doing.
Correct.
I don't have any problem with it. We've discussed it, I think, on the third occasion. The budget detail is there, and we obviously don't see that much of it, but trust that you guys are working with them and keeping an eye on it from my point of view.
Okay.
But I don't speak for the entire board, so I'd like the board to speak up if anybody feels differently.
I don't have any issue. I mean, 3%, I mean, we saw the presentation about the extra services that they're providing now and how they had to ramp up staff and stuff. So 3% in this environment seems reasonable. I wouldn't want to see it be 3% again next year. I would expect it to level off, but.
I think the other thing to keep in mind is that, they function as our Youth Services Bureau, which we're required legally to have. And they're still getting somewhere around 65 or 70% of their total funding through fundraising and grants. So from my perspective, the town's got a reasonably good bargain. If it was completely a town entity, I doubt we'd have the fundraising capability to, bring in the kind of money they bring in. So it seems like it's a relatively good deal for the town.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, I think Eric just was asking you for input to make sure we're confident. I think the lack of any additional expressed concerns probably reasonably indicates consent, Eric. So I think you could probably move forward.
Okay.
All right. Let's move on to item 8B, which is a letter of commitment for budget stabilization program. This is between KERMA or CIRMA and the Town Board of Education. So Eric, you want to tell us about that?
Sure. I'm going to share my screen again. So we get this from KERMA basically every 3 years. We typically sign on with our insurance company in 3-year increments. And they guarantee based on our, basically past claims, what the range of possible, in other words, they're willing to give us a 3-year commitment and say, our fees will increase no more than X. So that's what I'm showing right there. That's a 3-year agreement for what their fees are increasing. This year, our total increase for that insurance is basically flat. They've gone down. Our workers' comp has gotten cheaper. And the rest of our liability coverage has gotten more expensive, but overall our insurance budget for Kerma has stayed completely flat this year. So that's what a 3-year lock would look like. And they basically said, hey, if you're willing to agree to, to take us on for 3 years, we'll give you a budget stabilization package that says we will not increase your premiums more than this. So I'm bringing this to you to see whether this is something you want to, we're not obligated to sign it. But if we don't sign it, they're not willing to guarantee what future rate increases will be. So I'm bringing this to you as a Board of Finance to see what you would like to do.
Eric, so there's a cap, which is good, obviously. How are the premium increases calculated? And I know that's a loaded question. You probably have no clue, but I work with vendors who will, if I sign an agreement for a 3-year supply agreement, for example, in my business, and they say, hey, we'll limit our year-over-year increases to 3 or 4%. Well, you
Right.
pretty much guess that they're going to be pretty close to that every year, right? And so I don't know if there's some kind of mechanism by which this is calculated, and if it happens to be higher, they just cap it, or is there an objective calculation? Do you have any idea on that, how that tends to work?
I do know it's when they're offering the 3-year lock, they do it individually based on towns and based on what their loss history is. So if we were a town that had a big loss history, it would be higher. We are being affected because we just paid off a $200,000 lawsuit. So that was a little bit of a hit to us. But yeah, I know they adjust it town by town. So not every town gets the same deal, but remember they are a nonprofit. So they're passing on, premiums directly to us.
So it's basically an underwriting exercise. They're not taking necessarily anything on top of that other than to control their operations, basically.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That's kind of what I guess, but
yeah,
totally clear from here.
Yeah.
I have a question, Eric. What's our past experience been? If we signed one of these agreements before and it was capped at X, where the increase is X, obviously they didn't exceed it because that's what the contract says, but.
So for instance, you'll see the 21-22, what's on there from the policy. That year overlaps with the last 3-year one that they had. And they were, the workers' comp part was not negative. So they could have, met their commitment and still given us a 3% or so increase in workers' comp this year. But they're not. They've agreed based on their losses or our losses, essentially, that that number can be lower for this year. So they do seem to be, just because they give themselves the opportunity to increase by 3% does not mean they're going to increase by 3%. Let's put it that way.
I have one question in this contract. If you scroll on the next page, there's a clause in there about our commitment to right here. The town agrees to commit sufficient resources to support and implement the risk management initiatives agreed upon with Kerma. So is there a formal risk management plan that they work with us on? And does that add cost to us to implement that risk management plan, I guess?
Right now, we don't really have an official risk management plan. I've certainly sat down and had face-to-face meetings with people from their risk management department, talking about a number of issues, and talking through some of the projects that some towns do to reduce their or mitigate their risk. but they don't seem to be forcing the towns to do anything, if that answers your question.
Because contractually, we're committing to accepting their risk management initiatives and putting a plan in place. And I just want to make sure if we don't have a formal one, that it's not going to become a issue for us if they ever do.
But it says with we agree to commit sufficient resources to support and implement the risk and management initiatives agreed upon with KERMA. So
Right.
in other words, there would have to be some kind of agreement, or what I'm guessing is that some kind of agreement. You know, we do this with our risk managers too. And my work, where they'll run through and they may recommend safety training for drivers, or they may recommend the fire marshal doesn't come through. They may recommend COVID training, or so there's things like that to mitigate the risk.
Right.
My guess is
probably have to agree to that, and it would probably be pretty reasonable.
My guess is it's kind of boilerplate language that's in there so that if we do start to have losses that are up, we want to come in and say, guys, you got to change something here. They could point to that contract language and say, hey, you got to listen to us.
Right.
We're having good loss experience, at least on the work comp side. So that's all running smoothly. But if all of a sudden we start to have injuries in our road crews, they're going to come in and say, you got a problem.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
Yeah, I would agree. I think part of the reason we're not really getting bothered for this is, basically aside from the one big loss due to the lawsuit, we've had generally a pretty good loss history, both on the workers' comp side. In the last year, I could think of really kind of two, maybe three total reportable accidents, which, considering you have a fire department, and a public works department, is, I think, actually pretty good. The public works one was very minor. It looked ugly, but it was really actually completely a non-issue. The only serious one that I know of in public works was a slip and fall that resulted in a couple of teeth getting knocked out, which, that sucks all the way around. But it's not like $100,000 loss either. So I think overall KERMA seems pretty happy with us generally.
Have they come back and made any recommendations out of that sexual harassment case that we had, that we do additional training or do things differently, or?
Question. Yeah.
No, they haven't made any recommendations.
Surprised they haven't. So.
Yeah.
I'm aware of this kind of thing with all the employees, you know what I mean? So. But I mean, that should be easy enough to do. If we have to do it, there could be computer-based online training that you could put people through and stuff like that, if we ever had to do it.
Sure, and we do. We are required as an employer that
Right.
all our employees take mandatory sexual harassment training, and that's documented.
Perfect.
Derek, do you have that scheduled by chance?
I don't have the list. My admin assistant has the list of all the employees, but we've been, last year we had a time frame when we had to meet it for all the employees. So we've been we pretty much shuffled all the employees through. I have on my list of things to go over that they're to review the new hires and ensure that they have all taken the online training. And KERMA does have a version of it that's available online.
Because with our the ESA policy next door, our supplemental, we're required every January to take the class, and everybody in the fire station has to take it and pass. So we're on that schedule, yearly at every January. So I think it behoove the town to get on a regular schedule for that and do what they have to do just to stay current.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, good point.
Eric, one more thing on this. Wasn't there something that went around that talked about how, and I'm not sure if it's KERMA, so maybe I'm getting this mixed up, but we would lose some potential digital loss prevention coverage?
So yes, I mentioned that to the Board of Finance a month or two ago. The one thing that Kerma is doing is dropping its cyber protection policy. And they're doing it because Kerma has had more than $2 million of losses this year for municipalities, which is, 4 to 5 times the cost of the policy. And obviously, if your losses are 5 times the cost of a policy in a year, your carrier is no longer going to allow you to do that. We do have a quote for a standalone policy that I brought to the Board of Selectmen, and they felt it was too expensive for coverage. So they declined to consider adding a standalone policy to cover cyber, which, and I discussed that with Val, because Val had some concerns, Valerie Bruno also. So I know she was talking to EastCon about potentially acquiring a standalone cyber policy to cover the school, but the town will be completely uncovered for cyber as of July 1.
Okay.
And I don't agree with that, by the way, but
I'm concerned with that too, but
It may be something we're going to have to look at coming in the next fiscal year, next budget cycle. I mean,
the Board of Selectmen looked at it. I'm not sure what else we go before we go beyond that, but
we're in better shape now because we back everything up, right? And we have a full restore available.
well, I mean, the point.
But it takes us hostage. We can recreate, right? So
The point from the Board of Selectmen was you're better off spending the money on prevention rather than cure. But, obviously my concern is, at any given time, we do have $3 million something dollars in our accounts. I really would hate to find out that somebody figured out some novel way to tap into that money, and we have no way to recoup, regardless of whose fault it is.
we do have a layer of protection with the banks, so they have to do a lot more regulatory wise than we even have to do. So you do have some comfort level with who you're doing your banking, but you still have your employee risk.
right. And there's just fraud. I mean, we've had
Right.
experiences with that. So
Which is your in-house people. If somebody decides to, write a phony check and put it in their own account,
Yeah.
But if Eric, you're signing every check, we're gonna just hang you for it. So.
I'm not actually worried about the physical checks. My concern is still electronic and wire transfers.
Right. As long as we have mitigation in place, there's a lot you can do, so.
yeah, there is a lot more prevention, and we've obviously done a lot with our IT systems over the last couple of years to try to get them in a better shape. I agree that some prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Sure.
But I'm also pretty risk averse. So
It's also nice knowing you're insured,
Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any other questions for Eric on this? I would say on the face of it, it probably, looks like a reasonable position for us to take take a step towards stabilizing our costs. Things can happen. We're a small town. It wouldn't take more than 1 or 2 major, losses to drive up costs pretty significantly. I'm no insurance expert, but I don't know if anybody else on the board has any thoughts or comments on this particular proposal.
Well, this is the proposal after their payout of that large liability for the sexual harassment. So this should reflect our additional risk as a town, right? So there shouldn't be any
Correct.
surprises.
Correct.
Right, but we don't have a large pool of exposure, and so we only have few employees, and all we have to have is one serious injury or something to really drive it up. This
Right.
providing a type of cap to me seems a prudent way to do it, and then percentages involved do not seem unreasonable to me. Anybody in the board have a different view or want to add anything or ask any more?
Basically agree with you, Mark. I think it's reasonable.
Do you guys want to make a motion that authorize me to sign this, and we'll put it to bed?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so if I understand you, Kurt, then you are making the motion that the Board of Finance authorize Eric to sign a letter of commitment for budget stabilization program between Kerma and the town. Eric, does this also require a signature from the Board of Education?
It does not, because the town pays the whole bill for insurance for the town and the school.
Okay, so this is between the town and Kerma then. So that would be the motion. Does anybody want to second that motion?
Sure, I'll second it.
Okay, Rob seconds it. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, let's take a vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. To move on to item 8C, this is the community center, community/senior center building committee authorization of funds for architectural designs. There is a plan in your packet, which Eric is showing us today. Okay. Eric, I did see one, I thought it was an error, and maybe Adrian just left that out, but I think where it says office in the center, isn't that supposed to say Board of Finance office?
That's the major where it says all, that's really Board of Finance office.
Or is that storage?
I think they're gonna put us in a basement.
Okay, that would probably be more appropriate. Okay, sorry, did derail that. Eric, you want to tell us about this one, or do you want to invite somebody else to talk about it, or just give us?
Well, Ed's on to talk.
If Ed's on, I would have Ed give the description.
Okay, the chairman gives the floor to Ed. Ed, you want to tell us what we're looking at here and talk about the plans and your guys' thoughts for moving forward on this?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I did most of the site investigation. I was there today for half a day, verifying existing utilities on the site. I give credit to Adrian. He had the CAD program that came up with these architectural drawings. So for all this preliminary work, I'm the preliminary engineer and Adrian's the preliminary architect, trying to save the town some money here. Is Adrian still with us? I can't see on my screen if he's still part of the meeting. Adrian, you here? Adrian Manville?
Yeah, I don't see that he's on the.
Doesn't look like he's still on now.
That's fine. Okay, so he came up with this on his CAD program, and with several people inputting from the committee. We have a fairly good committee. We've met since last summer on this, and also got input from not only committee members and their contacts, but also from Kathy Pelosi and the seniors in terms of this would be, of course, a community/senior center. So we got input through them. Basically, this drawing you see has a centrally located kitchen, which had been moved. It wasn't there originally, but some of the committee members suggested we centrally locate it so that we can service up to 3 meeting functions at once. The large room on the left is a big room that will put a divider down that we could break into 2 smaller rooms. But that big larger room is the main big meeting room. And then on the bottom, you see a mid-size meeting room, a storage area, and then a small conference office and another smaller office with accessible bathrooms. But the idea of having the kitchen in the middle is just to conserve coffee or whatever to different functions at the same time. and multi-purpose. And to orient you then, okay, so in your drawing here, north would be down below, and above this drawing would be the existing town hall and community room.
And which is the main entrance, Ed?
The main entrance is on the top side there. It would be
The hallway.
a large glass door, and with Amanda's input, we're going to put glass on either side and room for a greeting table, so that if we have a function, we could sign people in here. So the main entrance would be on the top side of this, which would be facing the existing town hall, in the back of town hall. Okay.
So single door then. Okay.
Yes, yeah, single door, because it saves money to have a large commercial single door versus a double door. Plus the double door, you never get it to seal properly anyways, in terms of weather. So it'd be better to just have a large single door with glass on either side. So you can fully see the inside of the building, of the hallway entranceway there. And so, yeah, so this is as a result of several months' work. And again, it's just very preliminary. This could end up changing totally once we get an architect on board and get additional community input. This could end up looking nothing like this, but this is a starting point to give to an architect, so we're not starting from scratch. It's a foundation plan or a footprint, if you will, of what the town needs for additional community meeting space. Okay, so this morning's site investigation pretty much verified that the drawings we were able to dig out from 2006 are pretty much accurate in terms of where the septic tank is and where the septic field is. So orienting this building to the site, the septic field is 150 feet away from town hall. So we've got plenty of room and not have to interfere with the septic field and the leaching galleries and trenches. The only thing that's in the way of this right now is the septic tank that could be moved, as it was done, to put on the existing town hall addition in 2006. So it's not a big deal. It's been done before. We'll have to do it again. If we only had the long-term planning committee at work back in 2006, we would have moved the tank a little bit further out to the north. So the only thing standing in the way here is the septic tank and a storm drain, which is easily moved, that would have to be adapted anyways. We would tie the roof drains from this. We'd have to tie the roof drains in and attach it to a storm drain, which would be relocated anyways. The gable side of this roof on the south side is perfect application and orientation for solar. So we could eventually, maybe not right at first, but at least consider in the future putting solar panels on this roof facing south, and finally get our town into solar, like many other towns have done with grants and so on. The existing town hall the gables is in the east-west direction, so it's not conducive. And plus the shade of the trees, it's not conducive for solar panels on the existing town hall. But this new building would be. So that would give us a little bit of green environmental incentive to do this. And again, the idea is having it in this location is for two reasons. Number one, it's functional for large functions where you can continue to use the existing community room. And then also, the townwide survey said that, number one, the community center is one of our top priorities. And number two, this was the location that majority of the people said would be good. They're used to coming to the existing town hall and elementary school, and having all of our functions in this similar area would be a good idea. So that was the majority of the vote for location. Any questions on this?
It seems to have a fair amount of space dedicated to the offices and the conference room. I'm just kind of curious what the intent is for the office space.
Well, the upper right-hand corner is an office, and I wish Adrian were here to defer to him. However, for some examples the committee came up with in that office, you may have a visiting nurse come in and take that office over for a day to be giving shots or to be giving medical counseling in a small, intimate, small setting, one-on-one from one chair to the other chair. The little bigger room below that is more of a small conference room with a 6-person sitting at a conference table. But again, talking to the town employees, we just need more meeting rooms. And so we can see during the day, a lot of these meeting rooms being used for small and mid-sized private meetings. In the evening, of course, they could be used for many functions. I mean, having the 3 bigger rooms, you could have many functions going at the same time and/or meetings. We also, by the way, want to put a large projector, probably through donations. Kathy Pelosi is talking about people that want to donate to how to equip this building. So furniture, movie projectors, and so on. So we'd want to get a good overhead projector with a drop-down screen for the large room to be able to show movies to families or teenagers, for example, whatever. But again, we have small meeting and large rooms to serve a variety of needs.
Eddie, what's the capacity of the large room, say, without the partition?
Well, I was going to ask you that, Kurt, in terms of square footage for the fire code. It's 23 feet by 40 feet, so that's 800 square feet. What's the maximum? I'll ask you the same question. 800.
I'll run it by the fire marshal and let you know.
That when that room is full, we can it's 800 square feet, so we can extrapolate that from the fire marshal.
Anybody know how big the large room is at town hall, just for visual or spatial reference?
Let's see. It is 40 feet east and west by about 50 feet north and south. I'm going off of some old drawings here. So real estimate would be 40 by 50. That's 2,000 square feet.
I don't think it's quite that.
Room?
Or 40 by 40, Eric. Maybe. I'm sorry. What's 40 squared? 40 times 40.
It's 1,600 square feet.
I'm sorry.
Smaller than that.
I think it's 40 feet by 40 feet, but roughly.
Okay.
My drawing is cut off. I've only got the east-west dimension. I know the east-west dimension is 40 feet. I don't know what the north-south dimension is. So maybe it's 40 by 30. So it's anywhere between 1,200 to 1,600 square feet, the existing room. So that the existing room is bigger than this room.
I just note that Jeff Murray sent a note in the chat that said the storage is for groups using the building, and eventually we'll need an office for our senior services coordinator. That's kind of what I was wondering, if that office was designated for. Personally, I like the idea of the solar, and I would suggest that that's got to be one of the specs that you probably provide to the architect once you do get drawings, assuming we move forward.
Certainly.
Because I would guess that you're going to need a storage capacity in that storage area or somewhere else for the storage battery. So that's not an insignificant consideration.
Well, that's if we have a battery. You can go just go tied to the grid without a battery also.
Yeah.
And this does have a full walkout basement by the slope. So, it's just really for mechanicals right now. We haven't done anything,
Yeah, thank you, Diane. Diane's on our committee and has been a great asset to the committee. And so the lower right-hand corner, again, orienting this footprint to the site, the lower right-hand corner of this drawing is the lowest point on the site. So we're trying to get this situated to be able to have a walkout basement in the lower right-hand corner.
And that would be for mechanicals mostly. That makes sense.
Mechanicals, but also town storage and drawings and various things. And then be able to go out in the back on the bottom side of this drawing. We have just a beautiful big grass field out there for any kind of outdoor activities, or be able to utilize that lawn as a lawn space for families and to have sports in the field over the nice green grass of the septic field.
You tying into the existing septic field? Does that have the capacity to handle this? Or?
Well, I've been told by John Valenti it has an extra capacity, but that's of course that's hearsay. So what we got to do, that's why we're going to hire a civil engineer to do the site plan, and they would have to study it, and then we'd make that decision as to whether that tank is actually going to be attempted to be moved, or maybe we just put it in a next size bigger tank, because the tank there it looked pretty good. It was in good shape today. It was put in 2006, so it's only 15 years old. So the skip septic said we could try to drag it over for you. So we may attempt to drag it to the new location in the trench rather than trying to crane it out, or just purchase a new one. But the civil engineer will tell us in terms of capacity of the septic system.
Eddie, I just heard from the fire marshal. I asked a question regarding a large room.
Okay.
And he states that if you had tables and chairs, it would hold 53 people.
Okay.
If chairs only, 114.
100 and what?
14 and 800 square feet.
Okay. There you go. Thank you. Thank you, Kurt.
And I have another a question, say for Diane and you and maybe Eric. Are there been any discussion for plans of what to do for the old community room at Town Hall? Would it be incorporated into this addition? Maybe more office space for Town Hall or something like that? Any discussion?
Well, we do want it. We're trying to balance its location. We want to put it out far. First of all, we want to build this initially as a separate building. There's financial advantage of doing that. We don't want to put it as an addition to the building. So we want to put it out as a separate building. With maybe in several years to come, we might be able to connect with a covered walkway to be able to utilize both spaces. In terms of the existing community room, I know there's been a lot of ideas scattered about that. There's just, I guess, defer to Eric. Eric, you have a lot of ideas on it, and we need more space all around. So there's a lot of different things we can do to that. Keep it one big room or start to petition it off a little bit for all the needs we have in terms of troopers and building department and storage. And Eric, do you want to pipe in on that?
I think there's lots of possibilities. I mean, the town just basically has to decide what it is it really wants. I have two comments. The first is that the town of Andover tends to hold buildings for hundreds of years. So whatever we build, our great grandkids are either going to be happy with us or they're going to hate us. And so we really need to be thinking about whatever we build, that we really build it for the long haul. And I would say today in my world, that means a building that was designed to be net zero and had enough solar on it to make it, energy neutral, which is very definitely possible when you've got that much acreage for solar that's south facing. Mm-hmm. The second thing is there is some validity to using a battery storage system for backup power. The only thing I would say that would make that less amenable is that the town really needs to pursue a better backup system for the town hall itself. And when you think about the loads generated by an elevator, it's tough to meet that on any kind of long-term basis with battery storage. I think the town also ought to be thinking about, using, also incorporating charging stations for electric vehicles at some point. Those would be the two things I would say, to my mind, make sense if you're going to really pursue a project like this. We still need to get a bunch of input, I feel, from the senior community as to exactly what they want in their center. And I think we would do that as part of the process of hiring an architect, because there'll have to be some community engagement, and so we'll have to really kind of refine exactly what we want. What was the other question you had for me?
Going back to the power, I know in capital improvement committee we're on, we talked about the possibility of a need for a better generator or more generation. So we could give to the architectural program that we want to, if we're going solar batteries, that we want to be integrated with our existing backup generator or a new system that would be totally integrated. Right. So,
Eddie, if I could maybe suggest another thing to look at.
Yeah.
Even prior to the generator and the solar, is you have three-phase that's probably less than a quarter mile away, and to run the three-phase up the rest of the way up 316 to School Road, and end it just past the school, and then you'd have three-phase capability from EverSource to take care of the school, the new town hall, senior center, community center, including the fire station. We're wired next door for 3-phase, but we're operating on single phase. So just an idea for the future.
Yeah.
And it's not that far away. It's right down on 316 between Boston Hill and School Road.
We should definitely do that. Now, do we need a grant to do that, or would Eversource bring it up on their own if we're going to utilize it?
They're not going to bring it up on their own. They're going to want to charge the hell out of you. But I would get that somehow in the design of the project, just for, especially if we're talking about the future, is what we are.
So again, the engineers and architects we hire need all this data and suggestions and be able to integrate, backup generation, solar batteries versus not, and 3-phase. We need a system that'll serve that's another advantage of putting the building here, Kurt, is that we can get all the buildings integrated.
Correct.
Right.
We talked a lot about in the committee that, we want to get this building up and built as economically as possible. There's a lot of things we want, but there's a lot of things we can do in phases too. And so we don't have to outlay all the money out front, but we have to be smart about how we do it and plan it out and make sure we just have the future built in and have the phases set up so we know what we're going to do going ahead. We're not going to be able to build a super building day one because we won't have the money, but we will get there.
Right, but Jeff Murray just made a very good point that we've got a large meeting room for large functions, but we break that with a divider. Now we've got 3 mid-sized meeting rooms, and it's a community center. It's not just a senior center; it's a community center. I volunteered a lot for Cub Scouts. Cub Scouts always need a place to meet. So you can see one or two dens meeting in here certain nights of the week. And you can see movies being shown. You can see maybe a small room with seniors playing bingo while teenagers are watching a movie in the other room. So it's for the entire community and an infinite amount of functions that could take place. And we tried to make these rooms as flexible as possible so that many uses could take place here for ages 5 to 100. Thank you, Jeff Murray, for that comment.
I have a question. Is there going to be increased parking for this facility?
Well, again, that's something we could look at. We could extend the parking lot if we have to. If that's a study that would be done in terms of usage and time. The school's parking lot is essentially empty in the evening most nights. We can utilize that, of course, but certainly we could, as part of the site plan, we could add a few more parking spaces if warranted. Just to remind everybody, the school's running at half capacity right now, less than half capacity. So that means the parking lot is running at less than half capacity.
But as you know, I've seen Wednesday nights where there's a drill session going on at the fire station. There's a large meeting or vote going on at town hall, and there's basketball running at the school from the rec commission from the 3 or 4 various towns that participate. Right. And I've seen cars parked on School Road because there's no parking at the fire station, there's no parking at town hall, and the school's full. So I have actually seen that, and that's happened more than once. So
we have
just an idea to maybe figure on some extra parking for this facility.
But
as part of the overall picture.
You never design parking for the absolute worst case scenario. And it's very easy to address because the Planning and Zoning Commission has a very well thought out matrix for determining number of parking spaces required for all types of occupations. So that would be just maintaining compliance with the zoning commission's requirements.
But if we need them, we can do them. There's so many we could add to the town hall's parking lot to the north, because we're trying to fit a new building plus the existing septic plus maybe a little additional parking. If we need more than a few more spaces on that parking lot, Eric and I have walked several years ago between the firehouse and Hebron Avenue, 316, and the north side of School Road has there's 200, 300 feet there of space where you can, cars can park perpendicular to the road between the firehouse and 316. So you could add several parking spaces down the street with a walkway coming up. Okay, so remember walking that area, Eric?
Yep.
So we have the ability to add spaces if we need to. That's why we need to hire the architect and the engineer. Matter of fact, that parking area between the firehouse and school 316, that could easily be graded and done by the Public Works Department, and then paved with the paving program in town. So we could do that in-house. The fill is already there. It's just there's just sand and fill along there, and there's just nobody wants to park down in there because they might get stuck in the soft sand. But there's a lot of room there to add parking along School Road.
Well, personally, I like the concept. It looks very very usable, and it's a great start as far as I'm concerned. So
yeah, and thanks for the overview. It's a good overview there.
What do you need? Let's do it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going at. Can we, what is it that you guys are asking for? So let's put that on the table.
Well, what we got to do is get the ball rolling by hiring an engineering firm, and Eric's already pulled out the drawings from 2006, and we're going to ask them and 2 others to submit a bid for a staged RFP for preliminary site work survey and final site work engineering drawings with septic, and preliminary conceptual drawings from with an architect to go with some schematics. So it would be staged. So we're not going to spend all 20,000 at first, and certainly not all 50,000. The 50,000 would be well enough to do all of the construction drawings to completion. So we want to do it in stages. So Eric could put out requests to start off with the site survey, which we started today with volunteers. We've got it all painted and marked out with our Public Works Director. And Eric and Skip Septic. So we need a drawing to be done at this point while it's painted and marked out.
And Eric, this money would come out of the existing fund, correct?
This money would come out of the existing. You would be taking out of the community, the multi-use, multi-purpose building fund.
Community building, yeah. What's the balance of that now? 400 or 450?
It's like 447,000.
Yeah.
That may not be enough to certainly complete the building and furnish it, and especially with solar, but it should be enough to at least build the building proper, and it should be enough to build an empty building and utility tie-ins.
Well, to move this along, I'll make a motion to allocate $50,000 from the senior/community center fund for your design and the rest of the criteria involved. So.
Stage design.
Stage design. There you go. That's a motion, Mr. Chairman.
You're on mute, Mark.
Thank you. Let's hold on the space bar. Do we have a second? Kurt's motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, Diane seconds it. So, Diane, you'd originally asked that we added this to the agenda item, and I think it was 20,000 at that point. Now it's 50,000. Just wondering kind of what we're trying to cover here.
So this is the stage thing. We're looking for 50,000 to do all the drawings, but we're going to do it in a stage. So we're only going to go out there for the conceptual drawings, and we want and we're going to stage the RFP that way. So we will spend the money only for what we need to do to get the town concept going and getting participation and conceptual drawings. And we won't move to the full 50,000 until everybody's on board. So we want to spend the money in stages. So we want authorization for all of the drawings to be up to 50, but we're going to start with just the beginning stages.
Because we feel we'll get better prices if we put that out there. An architectural firm, and secondly, an civil engineering firm feels that if they know that money's there for the final design, then we'll get a better price for the final design as a package, but we're going to do it in stages. So the initial outlay is for probably two different firms: a site surveyor and civil engineer and septic design, and then an architectural firm. That's why that's what the 20 is for. But we want to put the whole thing out there so that we get a better price for everything as a package deal. So we'll do it staged.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what's the process for making the selection? So Diane said, we'll wait till everyone's on board until we spend the rest of the money.
Well, we figure after we get the very nice architectural drawing, all we got here is a floor plan. But there, by the way, there is a nice 3D walkthrough that Adrian does. All you got to do is look at YouTube of the Board of Selectmen meeting like we had last week. Amanda could help you find that, where you go through halfway through the meeting and it takes about 10 minutes with a 3D walkthrough. And that's all good bells and whistles, but we need professional architectural drawings based off of these preliminaries to go to a town meeting and have everybody look at it, we believe.
So then we'll get some good cost estimates. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll have better candles on costing and so on.
Yeah.
So
what I was asking was kind of internally, is this the committee making the decision when to go on to spend the next 30,000? Is it Eric? Is it how, what's the mechanism here?
Well, Eric suggested that we get the architectural drawings and the site survey done and the architectural drawings. And at that stage, once it's stamped by a licensed architect and we have good drawings, we go to a town meeting at that point is that what you said, Eric? I believe your suggestion was?
Yeah, my goal is to bring this to the public as soon as we have good visuals to present to the public.
Right.
If you think about it in terms of like a bridge project, it would be the 30% design stage, right, where you're far enough along that you have cost estimates, you have a preliminary design so you know what it's going to look like and how it's going to blend into the site. And then you go to the public and say, hey, this is what we're proposing. This is roughly what it's going to cost. Are you on board? Are you not on board? What changes do you want? Prior to, I certainly don't want to get all the way up through a fully designed, architecturally designed building and then have the public say, you know what, why waste the money? So the goal is to get to the point where we have enough information to bring to the public as inexpensively as possible.
And we'll make sure they show solar panels on the south side of the roof. Adrian's software didn't show that at this point, but we have a lot of extra good input to give to the architect.
If you can, I would also suggest you might, at least whether you present this to the town once we get there or not is another question, but look for options if the budget allows, right? So, hey, we have this level of finish or this level of finish or this level of finish. Is it worth it 10, 15 grand to go up to the next thing, or do we, it doesn't cost that much more to expand the footprint sometimes, that's something to consider. Ask any real estate agent. That's why houses are getting so darn big. It doesn't cost a lot more to add a little more square footage. It's an impressive, potentially useful thing, at least in this project. So,
okay. Yep.
And I think also in the meantime, we get our Board of Selectmen to get it onto our state senator, Mr. Casano, and the rest of the state legislators that maybe some grant money for us, for our little town to assist in the construction of this building. It's out there, and they.
I thought about that a lot, and especially with respect to maybe the solar and the green building. Having and I like Eric's idea of having a net zero building again. Forward thinking, I understand trying to get this done as inexpensively as possible is admirable, but what is it that we're trying to get done? And if it's something for the long haul, that's obviously should be really a strong consideration of the design. So
it's been a long time, if ever, that we've gotten any type of grant, money or things like that from the state for a large project like this. I think we're due. So, personal opinion.
Understood.
Any other questions? Okay.
Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none, let's take a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No abstentions? Remember to hit your mute key. If you're muted, you'll never get your voice heard. So, yeah. All right. Hearing all positive votes, all yay votes, the motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Very good. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Diane. Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is the 8D, the Veterans Monument Park updates. Eric, did you want to share your screen again and go through that? I think you have something right there.
Yep,
No, okay. All right.
hang on. Okay, so again, the Board of Selectmen motioned at their last minute or their last meeting to support some upgrades at Veterans Monument Park and to allocate up to $20,000 in funding. And that was to do a series of things. The first is put in a new well that will feed both potential upgrades to the old town hall, and also to allow a sprinkler system at the monument. That will also require an in-ground vault to hold the pressure tank and the equipment for the sprinkler system and the drain back system. And also that will fund electrical upgrades. The Board of Selectmen has preferred, instead of a standalone meter fed directly from the utility in a transformer, to tie in directly to the museum's electrical system. So basically that will mean trenching from the museum down to wherever the location of a sub panel out in the field somewhere. So that's what they've asked for, and they left it up to the Board of Finance to figure out where to take the money out of the existing budget. So there are a bunch of possibilities, but I would also say that all of the stuff, none of the things we're talking about doing right now will occur before the June dedication. They're all things that are going to be done in, say, the August timeframe. So I don't think we actually need to identify the location of where we're taking the money yet. The question is just simply, is the Board of Finance in agreement with that or not? If that makes sense. If you want to talk about where we could potentially, take the money, we can talk about that too.
But we do have places available where you think, Eric, we can wheedle this money out of.
Well, so I think we're going to end up with a little bit of a surplus this year, not a great deal, but there's three things. One, we really haven't touched most of the second allotment of money we got from the federal government for COVID relief. So, we have somewhere around $20,000 there. We could basically tap the whole thing and do it. That's one. The other possibility is that in last year's budget, because we didn't know exactly how it was going to work, we had budgeted for about $30,000 on the town side to do the software transition. And we did not end up spending that money. So after April 1st, you could reallocate that budget and agree to spend that if you would like. And the third obvious place is, you could just tap the contingency fund. So those are really the three you could take fairly readily to do that I know of anyway.
And I guess the other piece of information that maybe everybody doesn't have, but there's also a lot of private fundraising going on to finish this whole project from Jerry. So this is just really a small little seed stake for the town, correct?
Yeah, to put it in perspective, Jerry's fundraised for the monument itself and the initial stonework, which is somewhere around $30,000. And he's got more than that saved, or more than that donated so far. Honestly, between him and Ron's professional lawn care, the vast majority of the money spent on this project will be donations. So he's basically fundraising for the cost of the new monument, the cost of the site work, and the cost of the irrigation system, and the cost of seeding, and the cost of fill, and what the town and the site work itself, and potentially 2 new flagpoles. What the town is kicking in is the well and the vault and the electrical. So the town is certainly the town's portion is not it's not inconsequential, but it's certainly not the majority of the funding for this project.
Utilities infrastructure, really.
Correct. And if we so chose, we could, with the Board of Finance's approval, we could also pay for this out of LoCIP funding. We have enough money in our LoCIP account, certainly, to pay for this. It would take a little bit of work. There's a bunch of background that would have to be done to tap LoCIP, but it's very definitely possible if we choose to do that. Back
to that COVID funding option is, I know that there were still some questions about what's allowed, what's, what, I mean, is that going to be an issue, you think, at all, or? So I don't think we could do it with the money. Well, let me back up. Yeah. We really have no idea what we're allowed to do with the money we're going to get in the future from the COVID fund. Nobody knows that at this point because nobody's decided. What I'm talking about is money that was already given to the town. And this is going to sound kind of stupid, but what happened is they didn't spend most of the money they had planned to give the towns because they changed the rules initially on what was rebatable. So they asked the towns, how much do you think you're going to need? And we based on this criteria. So we gave that to them. And then they came back and said, oh, well, we're not going to cover that, or that. So in the end, we could get like $6,000 or $7,000 back when we asked for 30. And then later, just before the end of the fiscal year, when they had to give the money to the towns or give it back to the federal government, they said, okay, here's what we do. We're going to give you the money in one lump sum, but you got to spend it on one of these very narrow categories, and you've got to agree to that within the next 3 days. So basically what we did as a town is we applied all of the COVID relief money on paper to pay for to offset the cost for the resident state trooper. And then we took the money right back out of the resident state troopers money and put it in a general fund, that we could spend out of, which is really a stupid accounting trick, but that's what the state essentially asked us to do. So as far as I know, we have no restrictions on that money, at this point. I hope that makes sense to you. It didn't make sense to me when I did it. I'm not sure it's the way I would have done it, but that's at the town level, it's fine. I mean, I think, the state did what it did under the time frame. Okay, that answers that question. I know I'm personally I wouldn't be a fan of hitting the contingency fund for an expense like this, although I would say in general, I'm in favor of authorizing the funding. To me, it makes sense and it's appropriate, but that's my point of view. Other questions, comments, input from the board?
Mark, if I may, Eric, not following all the plans in total, is there any plans to upgrade the original part of the Veterans Monument along with the new section that Jerry's working on?
Well, they're going to reshape, move some of the stones that are in the back and kind of elongate it a little bit and fill in behind it so it's level, you know, and it's kind of handicap accessible. So that's one of the goals of it. I'm not sure that really answers your question.
Yeah, I just, I'd like to keep it taxpayer neutral. I don't really want to, would not like to use any of the taxpayers' money to make the improvements, because I don't know how many people know the history of that monument, but it was a brainchild. Was his name was Bruce Goulet. I don't know if anybody knows him besides myself and maybe Eddie. I'm not sure if you ever met Bruce, but Bruce Goulet was a Vietnam veteran, grew up in town. He passed away from cancer a few years ago. Very active member of the fire department, so on and so forth. But he came up with the idea when the state of Connecticut was doing the intersection project at 316 and Route 6 there, and those stones in the memorial that the stones sit on with all the names and things like that came from the old trestle. When they took the trestle down where the bridge is going across now, things like that. I got at that time Northeast Utilities and Connecticut Light and Power Company subsidiary to donate the service that has been up in discussion about having to put up a new underground service. There's an existing one there originally that was lighting the flagpole. That was all donated by Connecticut Light and Power. My labor, I had guys that worked for me at the power company donating their time. The power company donated vehicles, crane trucks to move those stones into place. But this entire brainchild of the Vietnam or the Veterans Monument Park was Bruce Goulet. That's the cornerstone of the monument itself, and what Jerry's doing and everything else, I just adds to the nice piece of property that it is. So but everything was done with donations of both in-kind donations and labor and vehicles and everything else. So it would be nice to keep it that way. If we can get a LoSiP, LoSiP funds are, we wouldn't touch the tax, anything else. If we're talking any cuts to this budget and things like that, we definitely, I don't feel can take any money, taxpayers' money to, at this time to improve make the improvements there. Just my thoughts.
Anybody else have any input there?
I'm not sure I completely agree. I feel the town, it is the town's park. And I feel like the town should have some skin in the game. And Jerry is certainly taking on the majority of the task in doing the fundraising for it. But I think it's appropriate for the town to contribute a portion of that. But that's just me too.
Yeah.
But isn't the incentive, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't listen to all the meetings, that the town's buy into doing the well and the electrical off of the old town hall is so in the future we have the ability to do something more with that if we wanted to put in permanent bathrooms in the old town hall or to create a visitor center or something like that. It was more of a long-term kind of futuristic looking forward kind of thing.
It would be done in such a way that the town would have more flexibility going forward. And the town would end up with a reliable water supply that could be used as a public water supply if the town chose to put in an outdoor fountain, and also to feed bathrooms potentially if the town chose to do that.
Eric, correct me if I'm wrong. They're talking about taking the power from the meter at the museum.
That is what their goal is.
And it's going to stay at 100 amp. and come down the hill and feed everything that's going to have to be fed there?
I mean, the very first thing I have to do is I got to figure out exactly where the board intends to put a pedestal with breakers in the field. And once I have that, I will address that with Lenco and see whether it's even possible to do without doing a service upgrade.
Not being an electrical engineer, but being in the field for the last 44 years of my life, 100 amp is not going to cut it. Coming off the building just to save the cost of a meter and stanchion versus paying Eversource Energy to put a whole new drop into that area. Especially, you're going to be running a well pump, you're going to be running lights, you're going to be running irrigation, things like that. I just don't see how that's going to work personally.
I originally planned on a standalone service with a standalone meter, but my suggestions were overruled. So
I just don't see the cost savings in there versus just paying Eversource to put in a new drop to say to Lenco's new new stanchion.
well, it's not the cost of the drop in the initial work. It's the fact that, every meter, costs you $30 a month forevermore.
But you're talking a 200 amp service. I mean, right off the bat. I mean, every house today is 200 amp. The 100 amp house services are long gone. Just look around, and to take a 100 amp existing 100 amp box, I think it is, but it could even be a 60 on a museum and run down the hill to the well, to the lighting, to irrigation pumps and everything else there. It's no way it's going to work.
Can I chime in? I was just wondering, I don't want to butt in, but I'm an electrical engineer. I've done electrical work for years. 100 amps would be, I mean, I don't want to jump over curb, but 100 amps would be sufficient for a 50 amp sub panel. And what we're talking about is we're not talking continuous loads. We're talking intermittent loads. So the loads that would be, let's just say for the sprinkler system and the pump at one time may not be the lighting loads in the museum. I mean, 100 amps is a lot of current. So, I mean, the well would probably draw maybe 20 to 30 amps at the most. Probably continuously, we're looking at maybe like a 17 to 20 amp load. Lighting, if we go to LEDs, it's going to be minuscule, probably 3 to 5 amps. So we're not talking about huge electrical loads here. We don't have any huge loads in the museum at the moment. So I really don't see currently any issues. I mean, like Eric said, we should reach out to the electrical contractor and see if they do. But if it's a more modern 100 amp service, we really shouldn't have any problems. But to upgrade to 200, we'd be talking $2,000 to $3,000 to upgrade to 200 amp service.
True.
So it's not a heavy hitter. And Adrian's whole point with this is we don't want to get stuck into a $60 bill every year for meter service. If we can combine that and somehow benefit the town, I don't know what we're going to have going forward as far as rail trail grants. We may be able to put bathrooms in there. We may be able to put water fountains in there. But if we have the well, it just gives us another option if we have water service to that building. So that was our thought process when we approved this.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. I think we probably don't want to get too far into design particulars here, although I think you guys are bringing up some important points. We just have a lot to cover, and ultimately, I think we end up relying on Eric and the Board of Selectmen to kind of direct the best approach here. Presumably, we budgeted, or this amount you're requesting is appropriate for the task at hand. Any other questions or comments on the board, part of the board about the expenditure? Would anybody like to make a motion that we approve the expenditure in advance, not knowing how much it is, of course, or where we may draw it from, which I do think it's appropriate for us to ask about sources. I never want to say, go ahead and spend the money without having an idea where it's coming from. So appreciate that Diane asked the question and Eric responded. Does anybody want to make a motion about this particular request?
I would make the motion to spend up to $20,000. The town contribute into is it called Monument Park?
Correct.
Monument Park, for the well and the electrical. Not to exceed 20,000. And I don't know how you weave in where the money's coming from. I mean, we want to say funding out of the current budget year, right? So.
Yeah, I think that sounds appropriate. And accurate, what you're trying to say. It's probably sufficient. Does anybody want to second that motion?
You could also say
Sure.
funding source, you know, that to bring it back to the Board of Finance for approval of the funding source before the money's spent. That way you get a final view of where the money's actually taken, which is appropriate.
So I will amend my motion to add that piece in.
Okay. To retract your motion and
Right.
I think we do it that way. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you're voting to authorize the town to spend up to $20,000 on the said improvements for the Monument Park, pending an approval of where to fund that expenditure at the further meeting, later meeting. Does that sound right? Okay. And Rob, do you still want to second that?
Sure.
Okay. Any discussion, further discussion of the board members on this topic? I mean, Kurt made an interesting point that this has always been a volunteer funded project. I tend to agree with Eric that I think the town, it's appropriate for the town to have skin in this game, if you will, and support a community park. That's just kind of my take on it. Anybody else? Any more input? Okay, hearing none, I guess let's take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay, any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, guys. All right, let's move on to our next agenda item. This is item 8E, which is the Building and Land Use Department online permitting system. Eric spoke a little bit about this earlier. This is the online service that would allow us to sensibly cut down the amount of hours of town employee time to do the permitting. So Eric, you want to kind of give us an overview?
Sure. So what this is basically an online permitting service for the building department and land use agency. And what it does is it provides a streamlined way for applicants to put in a zoning permit or a building permit or a wetlands permit, and then to be able to track it electronically in a fairly easy, consistent manner. Each individual that has to approve these things, because depending on what it is, it might require wetlands approval, might require zoning approval, it might require fire marshal, it might require, well, generally it'll always require the building official. So all of those would, you know, get streamlined electronic notifications. You would be able to upload all your plans, all your information in one shot. It will automatically calculate the fees for you. You can pay right there online. And we can interface it with the people's, you know, basically electronic banking option that we use now currently for the tax collector's office. So what it allows us is to reduce the hours available where a human will be in the building department, but at the same time, put the functionality back in the department so that, you know, somebody who needs to file a building permit can go online, download the information, fill out the application right there, upload everything that's needed, and pay for it right then and there, and it will automatically be in the system. You know, the next time the admin is in working, it just gets approved and it gets sent directly to the building official and everybody who needs it. So it's basically a streamlined method for, you know, modernizing the building department. And the second thing is that our intention is to basically not pay for it ourselves. And that is to simply sign an agreement with them so that they charge us per building application or per wetlands application or per zoning application. And then we build that cost right into the fee structure that we charge the applicant. So it will be cost neutral for the town. But we are actually going to be paying this company, you know, some $4,000 to $6,000 a year, depending on how many applications we have and exactly how many licenses we decide. So since that's an ongoing expense, I felt that was appropriate to bring to the Board of Finance.
I have a question. Today, is this an all paper process? Is this like somebody comes to the town hall, gets an application, fills it out and hands you paper?
You can email it in with a picture of your hand on it. I recently did it, so I'm familiar with the process.
Okay, so you know I haven't.
Permit for a shed on the property, so yeah.
Yeah, so we're pretty far in the Stone Age right now. You know, we just uploaded an Excel spreadsheet that people can use to fill out to, you know, so they can figure out how much it's going to cost them by just going down the spreadsheet. And we're just going to incorporate that straight into the program as we input it. But yeah, currently, you know, we've kind of half tried to move away from allowing people to submit electronically, but basically all they're doing is just emailing you all the forms. They're making PDFs and sending that in. Whereas having a true online form, you know, will hopefully cut down on a lot of the confusion that we're dealing with now.
It's like
the software has enough.
Copy some of the stuff.
Yeah. So this software is proven and has enough information that we need to gather and has the functionality we need to electronically take this information. There's nothing deficient in it. I mean, it gives us what we need is what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's a little more bare bones than the other common option in this area. So we're fortunate in that the building officials that we use Permit Link already in one of the towns they deal with. So we have a building official that's used to this system anyway. The competitor system to this has a yearly cost of somewhere for us between $11,000 and $12,000 a year, and an initial upfront cost of about $20,000 to institute it. So it's a better system. This is not the best system we can bring in, but it's the best system we're willing to pay for.
Right.
And I think I've seen demonstrations, you know, both from the vendor and our building official. Randy has sat down with me and said, okay, you know, here's what I see as a building official. Here's how I approve. Here's what the building admin would have to do. You know, here's how we track everything. Here's how we document. So I'm pretty happy with it. And when we had the meeting, I sat down myself, Amanda, and our wetlands agent and our zoning agent all sat down and reviewed the software, because we want one thing that works for the whole building office, not just for the building department, for building and land use. And I think we have that. And frankly, we've needed to go to electronic permitting, you know, forever. We just haven't done it. So now's the time. Now we're going to be kind of forced to, because we're going to have less. In other words, we're not going to be able to throw manpower at an inefficient system. You know, we're going to have to streamline our processes, because we're going to have a streamlined work staff there available.
And I agree with the whole efficiency things and streamlining things. It's just for us to implement this, I want to make sure that we do it. And do you know what I mean? And don't consider old practice. So I don't want to say, oh, somebody puts half of it in the system and then, oh, I'm going to email you the other half. Well, we're not really getting anywhere with our efficiencies if we kind of keep the old ways of doing things. So as long as we're kind of committed to making the switch, I think we have to. What if we have people who don't want to pay online? Are we going to accommodate anything else?
So this, yeah, that's a common question.
Yes.
What you would do is you would fill out an application, you would go through the software. You would still use the program to submit all the information, and you would be required to give us a paper check. We have the ability to do that. And we're also talking with the vendor. Probably what we will do is we will also put a computer in the public side of the building department in the hallway, so that an applicant, if by some chance they have zero computer or smartphone or anything else or tablet, they can come into the building department and they can fill it out right there on the town's computer, and it will be in the system. So they will have the ability to hand the check in directly. The only difference is there's going to be, for an applicant, there's a delay if you hand in a paper check, because the town's got to cash the check before you're going to get a building permit. Whereas if you've paid online, as soon as you submit the paperwork, the town can process it, and you basically cut the time to process a permit down to, very little.
And the key to the cost savings on the person, because we're going to eliminate that position, is to have this process fully automated. Otherwise it won't work, right?
I mean, it's not that. So I think actually we're still going to devote enough hours to it that we could physically get the workload done. But what would happen is, without it, then it would be much more difficult, because somebody's not going to have that same amount of time. In other words, we're making it less convenient because they can't walk into the building anytime they want and fill out an application, because we're only going to have somebody on staff, 15 hours or so a week for them to interact with. So this is a way to be able to still have the majority of people submit their stuff normally. Like any electrician, any plumber, any HVAC company, most towns have online permitting. So most of these companies, in fact, for instance, for our building officials, we are the only town they cover out of the 5 towns that they don't do all their permitting and approvals online. We're the only town they actually pass paper back and forth for. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're doing something our existing officials are already used to, just implementing it in our town.
Hey, Eric, is this the same system like Lebanon's using? I just pulled a permit for there. It was so easy.
I don't know whether there's kind of 2 common ones used here in Connecticut. I can't tell you what Lebanon has. We're using the same system that Ashford's using. There's a bunch of bigger towns actually that uses it, because surprisingly enough, I could give you a list of towns. The vendor gave me a list of all the towns in Connecticut. They're not the biggest one in the state, but there's probably 30 towns in Connecticut, 25, 30 towns that use their software.
Yeah, I don't really care which one. I just was commenting that I think it works fantastic. I think the dinosaurs don't use technology are aging out, so I don't think that's going to be a concern longer.
Based on my own personal experience recently with the towns, it's confusing because the forms are out, they're just not clear anymore. And so, I would have welcomed this opportunity. There will be, I assume, some kind of impact, Eric, in terms of the fees, if we're if this is a self-funding project, then is the building permit fees are going to be raised to cover this, or how does it, right? That we talked a little bit about that at different points.
So there's two things, and that's ultimately, I think, going to be a Board of Selectmen decision, because we just changed our fee schedule, like as of March 1st, because we hadn't changed it in about 15 years. And we had just gotten way out of line with our valuations for construction and our estimates of construction costs. So we have changed our fees already.
Right.
That should more than double the revenue that we bring in based on our previous fee structure. So the question I'm going to have for the Board of Selectmen is, since we're already increasing our fees way more than the cost of the software, do they want to just take that $10 per out of the fees we're charging now, or do they want to add $10 per application to cover 10 or 12, somewhere in there? And that's going to be a Board of Selectmen question.
Okay. Yep. Fair enough.
Eric, I just looked it up as Viewpoint.
Okay.
Amanda put that in the chat too. Thanks.
Yeah, that's
Good.
the other one we looked at. Viewpoint is really cool. That's, I think, nicer than Permit Link. I've demoed them both, but it's not, it's not an extra $6,000 or $7,000 a year nicer, is how I would look at it.
It's fine.
Permit Link's got all the functionality we need.
I know I personally read through the proposed contract here. The cancellation terms look pretty generous, actually. Doesn't look like there's any gotchas in terms of the fees and cancellation. They cap their data export if we need it in different forms. Their fees at the end is pretty reasonably, I do supply
Comment I have
work.
made on the software contract is it's a one-way contract. It's in their favor, not ours. So, because there's no liability for them if they screw up. So, but that's neither here nor there, because it's going to be cost neutral to us, but it's just us to make sure that if we ever have to separate our ways, we're able to get our data and recreate what we need to recreate. That's going to be the biggest hassle for us.
Yeah, and we're already, I would say that's one of the things we need to evaluate internally, because we have a separate, essentially setup for archiving this data. And we got to kind of talk through as a town, how we go in. And so currently it is possible for you to look up online, because we basically scanned in all the old permits. So you can look up old information. We used to have a computer in the lobby that allowed you to do that, but nobody ever used it. I mean, we had it there for years and it just never got used. I mean, so we do need to think through how we're going to continue to archive our material, and whether we consider this we're not going to consider this our sole archive of building permits. We're probably going to make, because we're a small enough town, we only have 1,200 houses. We maintain hard copy files of all of them. And right now we scan all that in. So we already have duplicate backups of this data. We're definitely going to maintain some archive of this data locally, is what I would say.
I mean, that's the only downside I see, is just us being able to make sure we have our records.
I think they actually require us for FOIA purposes to retain stuff, although I'm not exactly sure where it's retained. It's not, at least I haven't, not clear to me in the contract, but.
But we're not buying the Ritz here with this software, so it just serves our needs to get us where we need to be, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the only thing we have to agree to is we got to agree to use the software for like it was a ridiculously small time period.
6 months.
Yeah. Yeah, we agree to, to use it for at least 6 months. So I guess that means they could recoup, 150 permits worth of fees from us if we decided we didn't like it. So we're not on the hook for a ton of, we don't have a ton of exposure from a cost basis for signing
There are a
up.
minimum number of permits we have to process with them? Is it a time frame plus a number of permits, or I can't remember. I can't.
So we're gonna have to come to, so there's kind of two things here that are, we have to agree that, we're basically what they want is if they're gonna do it on their common deal is $10 per application.
Right.
And then that's their sole fee. But it also depends on exactly how many licenses we have and depends on how frugal we want to be. We could give the fire marshal his own so he can do his approvals directly, or we can have him share one with somebody else and save us one license, because that saves us money. So we think we're going to end up probably needing 5 licenses and be able to get away with 5 licenses, which means we're going to have a total cost of around $5,000 a year. So what we talked about doing with them is, and remember this, we're talking solely about building permits now, but we can also include, because we're doing zoning permits and wetlands permits also, those also count towards the total number. So I think we're going to be okay. He seemed to think we were going to run somewhere about $10 and $12 a permit in terms of cost. And we just have to decide whether we want to up our fees another $12 an application or whether we want to absorb it. And we'll probably choose to up our fees another $12 an application as we implement this. But the other thing I would say is that we're structuring that department right now by reducing the cost in the admin, and with the updated permit fees anyway, that department will be more than cost neutral. I mean, even instituting the software, that department won't cost us anything other than heat and electricity. We'll have absorbed all the cost, the employee cost.
Other questions for Eric on this system? Again, Eric, I think you're correct. It's probably appropriate for us to have reviewed it. I don't know that, again, we would need to necessarily approve it per se, based on what you're doing here. But we certainly could have a vote of confidence or a vote of approval if somebody wanted to entertain a motion, or we could probably move on. Erica, do you want us to take a vote on it, or are you comfortable not hearing the negative?
I mean, it would be better for you to vote on it, but if you don't vote on it, it doesn't mean I'm not gonna institute it. If you tell me no, I certainly wouldn't. But it would be cleaner if you approved it.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I mean, it's essentially a year contract that'll go it's basically evergreen unless we cancel it within the 90-day period. So, does anybody want to make a motion in terms of supporting the move to this online permitting system?
I'll make a motion. I want to make a motion to approve the online permitting system for the building department.
Okay, anybody second that?
Sure, a second.
Okay, Rob
I'm
seconds.
just waiting. Anybody else want to do the seconding, or I'll just take care of that tonight.
Kind of like a Jeopardy thing. Who's gonna?
I feel like it's my designated role tonight.
Everyone needs a best supporting actor, Rob. So that may be your role tonight.
There you go.
Okay, do we have any further discussion on this? Okay, hearing none, let's have a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to our next agenda item, which is 8F, the COVID funding update. Eric, you got something in the packet about this?
Sure, I gave you some information, but what I would say is that right now it's, I mean, I can tell you what we're going to get, and the information that I've gotten is that we're going to get it over a 2-year period. So sometime in the next 60 days, we'll get an initial allotment of funding, you know, which is great, but we really don't have any rules for how we can spend it at this point. If you take the literal definition of what they put out for rules, it doesn't seem like we can spend it on much of anything. The only infrastructure we're allowed to spend it on is sewer projects, water projects, and broadband infrastructure, none of which we really have. So the question then becomes how broad, when you say, you know, broadband, what does that mean? Is that Wi-Fi in a building, or is it rewiring an entire town with fiber? You know, when you say sewer projects, does that mean a new septic system for building, or is that just, you know, main line sewer problems? Same thing with water. Is water infrastructure, does that cover culverts? Because we could certainly spend it all on culverts. That would be no problem. But if it just means, you know, providing water to residents through some sort of municipal water supply, we don't do that. So the long and the short of it is, I really have no idea, nor does the state. You know, in fact, they basically sent a message out today and said, quit bugging us and asking us questions. We don't really know either. When we know what the rules are, we'll tell you. So we're going to get money, but we don't know what we can spend it on at this point. That's all I can really tell you.
Did you want to name that number?
Sure. We're supposed to get 319,000, but in 2 allotments, 12 months apart. So we're going to get half of 320,000 now.
Money that we can't spend.
Well, we might be able to spend it. We have no idea.
We need further guidance, I think.
Trooper or first
We need further
responder.
guidance.
Yeah, we need further guidance, I guess. Yeah.
Mhm. But you know, $160,000 sure would help us for this budget.
Well, so here's what we can't do. We cannot, absolutely can't use it to
Offset
offset taxation.
Right.
So it's got to be for something, you know, kind of completely outside the budget we're dealing with now.
Specific project of some sort.
You know, the only way we could offset it for taxation is if we somehow proved that we made a lot less money last year in town taxes because of COVID. But that's not the case.
Not the case, yeah.
So
We haven't had a problem collecting taxes, or we don't have any delinquent rolls that because of COVID, right?
correct.
We
So-
could relocate, we could reload the septic system before we build a new building.
I mean, no, I mean, honestly, that is one of the things I've been looking at and saying, you know, maybe part of what we can do is maybe we can knock off some of that, you know, yeah.
New well.
New well, yep. Very definitely. Hell, maybe an irrigation system, that's water related, right? No, you know, we just don't know, frankly.
Do you have any?
Firehouse is gonna need a new bus.
You need a new what?
A new bus. Our bus is getting to be 10 years old.
Yeah, not water, sewer, or broadband unless you put a heck of a Wi-Fi system on the bus. So
Mobile Wi-Fi?
You would think somehow you could tie it into anything to do with first respondings, you know, people, sick people. Do you know what I mean? Because it would
Yeah.
because you did a lot of you transported a lot of people, sick people, do you know what I mean? So,
I mean,
Yes,
it
yes, we
does
did. That's
seem
why we
like,
need a new bus.
I
it
know.
does seem like we can potentially use it to up our services to senior service, for instance. And maybe, so we have one grant in right now to provide some help to people, family members suffering from Alzheimer's. We could potentially use that for the town's match. So, there are probably legitimate things that we can spend the money on, but we just don't know the rules yet. So it makes it hard to say definitively, make any recommendations.
And Eric, I assume you'll just kind of stay in touch with similarly situated towns and see what they're going to try to do.
Yeah, totally. And we're just kind of waiting on federal guidance.
Yeah, wait for the guidance. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And they'll write the guidance, so you'll have 100 other questions after they write the guidance. So, yeah.
There's no way to write it to cover everything. There's always that.
True.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions for Eric on the COVID funding? Okay, hearing none, let's move to our revised agenda item 8G. That's the Board of Finance representative to the Capital Improvements Planning Committee. As I mentioned earlier, Louise is going to resign from that position. So we have a couple of options here. I'd like to have some member from the Board of Finance representative on that Capital Improvements Planning Committee. Kurt is currently a representative to that committee as a member of the fire department. So he has offered to also represent the Board of Finance. I personally wouldn't mind seeing additional representation. So we would also, we would benefit, I think, if somebody else wants to volunteer to be the Board of Finance representative to that Capital Improvements Planning Committee as well. So we kind of have a broad and deep representation over there. But I don't think there's any reason Kurt couldn't represent both the fire department and the Board of Finance. So that's where we are. Is anybody interested in serving as the Board of Finance representative to the Capital Improvements Planning Committee?
I think you need to. I will be the person of last resort because I don't have a job. So I do have, time to volunteer, but I'm not as qualified as other people for that. Do you know what I mean? I'm intelligent enough to figure it out, but I'm not in the trades. I'm not built, so.
You don't have to be.
Don't have to be? Okay.
No.
I mean, that all applies to me and then some, Diane. I'm just an insurance guy.
Actually, Diane, I do feel like having a couple, for lack of a better term, lay people on the committee is not a bad thing.
Not at all.
Yeah. So you would be a fine fit if you chose to do it.
I only mentioned I would serve in the other capacity also if no one else wanted to. But trust me, if you want to, I'm all for it.
Can you remind me when they meet?
The last Thursday of every month.
7 o'clock, so this sort of time?
Yeah, right around 7.
So I'm already doing the community center thing, so, but if you need somebody.
Well, the reality is Thursdays are actually one of my good days.
Rob can do it.
Perfect.
Well.
2 volunteers, sort of.
Fine.
All right. So Rob is saying he may be available, and Diane may be available, or are you? I'm not sure exactly what you're offering.
I will be available if you're desperate and nobody else wants to do it.
That was pretty clear. And you'd already said it, so I couldn't come in and say the same thing now, could I? Well done.
Okay, so two possibilities. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion for Rob to be our representative for CIP.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Does anybody have any further discussion? Rob, I think you do a fine job, and I appreciate you being willing to do so. And if you have to miss a night for some reason, Diane sounds like she'd be a pretty good second right there.
And from a liaison standpoint, we do have Kurt, but yeah.
Yeah, that's actually really good to have that backup. So, all right, good. Okay, any more discussion?
So the next one is the next one tomorrow, Kurt? Last Thursday of the month?
Yep.
Eric,
Was it the waste recycling?
Yeah.
Let me check my calendar.
In fact,
CIP was the 18th. It's actually the third Thursday.
Third.
I stand corrected.
All right, I have a few. Okay.
Sorry.
Just want to put something in my phone so I don't forget that I did this in my moment of altruism.
Yeah, we had the 18th.
You know.
Yeah, and
Okay.
Amanda, can you just make sure to CC Robert England on the CIP announcements?
well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We haven't voted.
Oh, sorry.
I'm going down in flames here with all the enthusiasm I'm showing.
No, just kidding. I sense that we may have a vote. So if any more discussion? Okay, let's have a vote. All in favor of Rob representing the Board of Finance at the CIP?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Glad to hear it. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate your
Welcome.
stepping up. And Diane also. Appreciate you guys offering. So, okay, so the motion passes. Very good. Thank you, guys. All right, now we'll move on to our item 8H, which is our budget discussion. So there's a couple things. I think we obviously have budget workshops up and coming. We've covered a lot of territory tonight. I do think we should probably talk a little bit about the budget, even if we don't go in depth. Eric did present a document. I don't think it's actually part of the packet that has, I don't know, what did you have, about 143 options here, Eric, to reduce the budget at the town. You've got, actually, just joking aside, it looks like you've got 11 items totaling a total of $75,000 that could be trimmed. There's some significant downsides. Eric, this is kind of exactly how I think we would want to see that. I tend to be a spreadsheet guy, but this is very well structured, so it's actually well done. I don't know if we want to kind of go through each of these, but that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing to do either. I'd also just kind of want to clarify, you talked a little bit about your budget spreadsheet earlier, talk about the status of that. So was there anything else that you changed in here that you had not, that we haven't talked about? We know you took the money for AHM out of both the RAM and the AES budget. Anything else there that we would want to take a look at?
No, not at this point. The only thing I would say is I didn't update. So the main budget sheet and the revenue sheet are correct. I would ignore the last page, the graphs sheet, because that has not been, I haven't updated the column information. So that is not going to be correct. But the revenue sheet should be correct and the budget sheet should be correct.
Your RAM number does not include the rebate to the towns, correct?
So the RAM number in the M column, which is the one, the colored column, has included with that money in the money coming back to the town from AHM billing the town and not the school. So the reduction from that, and it also has in it the reduction from the money they're returning to the town from last year's unexpended fund balance.
So the $77,000 credit is in there, so to speak.
Correct. Right.
Okay, yeah, and you could see that differential, our contribution dropped. Okay, all right, good. That's, yeah.
Now, I will tell you that that's my calculation of the numbers. That was the original, the last budget they've actually put out, which is the March budget. Plus we know how much how much the AHM contribution is. And also what I don't know is how much they actually budgeted for AHM. So I just subtracted out last year's AHM money. And then the second part of that is I just, basically subtracted the amount they said, our percentage back that we're getting out of that total pool that they're returning to the towns. So I think that number is, if not perfectly accurate, it's practically accurate.
Yeah, it's going to be in the ballpark, I think, for the purposes of our thing. So appreciate you doing that. Yeah, I was very pleased to see that the RAM Board of Education voted to return that money to the town. I had talked to Lori Blake last week to clarify that's actually what it was, that it was the amount potentially be returned to the town. And the way she was talking made it sound like that was not necessarily the direction that they were moving in. And I, said I thought that they should strongly consider returning a good portion of it. And apparently Marlboro's in a tough tax situation this year as well. Hebron maybe not so much. So at any rate, I'm glad we didn't have to take that battle up, if you will. I think that it was the appropriate thing to do on their part. So I'm glad we handled that. So, okay. All right, good. All right, so thanks for the clarification on the spreadsheet. We've obviously got some things to take a look at here. I do think that if everyone is amenable, it would make sense to kind of go through Eric's proposed, or not proposed cuts, but the options that he's presented to the budget. There aren't that many of them. It's pretty straightforward. He's listed the benefits and he's listed the downsides for each. Eric, you have that? Do you want to share that on your screen? I have it up if you want me to do that too. We can.
Sure, I can share that.
Okay. Just while we're waiting for that, I'll also mention that we talked to Valerie about potentially asking to offer the same type of thing. Are there some savings that they could potentially look at, and if it's got an impact negatively, if they could identify what that impact is, so that we're not flying blind if we make adjustments to their budget. We want to know and present a rationale to the town residents when we go to vote as to actually why that would make sense, or what the downsides would be if we do eliminate some money from their budget. So we haven't heard anything back from them. So if we haven't, I would propose that I'll write a note to the Board of Ed and also to Valerie, just kind of restating what we'd like to see, seeing if they can come up with something internally, even if it's something they don't want to do, but identifying what the downsides would be along with that. So we all know that increase is a big one to swallow. Okay, Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, item number 1 is combining the building department administrative position with the assistant town clerk. Currently, we have a 26-hour-a-week position and a 30-hour-a-week position. Both of them offer benefits. We would be combining down to a single individual that works 40 hours a week and has basically 20 hours in each office. It would still be a union position that offered benefits, but your total costs go down pretty significantly. So that's probably the biggest single thing from the operating budget that you can potentially do. Without, I guess, laying off another employee. There's really not all that much. The Board of Finance has its own legal budget that was put in there because prior boards of finance didn't feel like they had enough autonomy to be able to seek legal advice if they had questions. So it's a budget that hasn't really been used from year to year. It used to be higher. It used to be 4,000, and I recommended they cut it down to 2,500. But that's never been tapped. So if you have the confidence in the Board of Selectmen and myself as the town administrator, you can agree to give up that budget and spend out of the town's general legal fund if you have legal questions. So it just simply depends on what your comfort level is, in doing that. Previous boards had lobbied for it strongly. You may or may not agree. So that's number 2.
Eric, let's pause after each one, just to see if anybody has any specific questions. I don't want to drag it on, but I also want to make sure that we, kind of give everybody the opportunity. I mean, number 1, we kind of talked about, and I think it was pretty clear, but so probably there isn't any.
Number 1, today, the person who had that job has resigned, so we don't have that position at all. So is there a potential that the union will say, no, you can't put those duties into that other job? Isn't that our decision if we don't fill a position?
So basically, there's a question of how hardball you want to play. So I am under no legal obligation to fill that position. I am because it is technically a union position. The duties of that position have to be filled by a member of that same union. And they've sought fit to legally remind me today that I'm not doing that at the moment. And I'm about to be grieved if I don't stop doing that. But that's neither here nor there. So what I'm saying is legally, I cannot fill that position. Legally, I can assign those duties to the assistant town clerk. I can just do that. What I can't do is adjust the town clerk's hours and increase her hours so there's enough time to actually cover both. That has to be bargained with the union. And the union also has the right to force me to bargain over the wage for the person doing that. Because if you're assigning somebody additional duties, they're pretty much always going to ask you to pay them more. So the long and the short of it is the union's going to let me do it. They're going to horse trade a little bit, but we're going to be able to do it. I have no question about that. So number 1, I would say is pretty close to a given at this point.
Okay.
I've met with the union a couple times. We've talked it out. They're broadly in agreement. We're going to go back and forth a bunch of times to get an MOU that we can both agree with, but that will probably happen.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Yep.
So my question on number 2, the thought process behind this was having an independent budget because there were disagreements between the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, and who's right?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And the Board of Selectmen not thinking it was appropriate that
Wouldn't let anybody spend that.
the Board of Finance spent legal money trying to prove the Board of Selectmen was wrong, basically.
I don't have a problem giving up a legal budget as long as we have access to legal funds if we need it. Do you know what I mean?
I'd also note that, some of the driving forces behind that idea are now on the Board of Selectmen.
I was having that same thought, but I think
I seem to remember that.
Yeah, this was a different era, I think, and there was a lot of there was more discord and concern about the way the town was being operated. So that's something to take into account. I mean, in theory, it's not a bad idea, but in reality, I think we all have to look at that and say, is that something really likely to have happened? If it's not something that's happened, it's just going to be an under expenditure each year, so. Right. And as Eric said, do we trust the Board of Selectmen and the town manager to, allow us legal representation when and if we feel it's needed?
It's different times now, I think. Yeah. That has gone away, right? So
I think we can dispense with it. We haven't used it, as Eric said. So, in this context, I too am comfortable letting it go.
Yeah. Well, we can make decisions on all these things later, but
Yeah.
I would agree with that. So, so Eric, number 3 then, if you want to.
Yeah, number 3 is tougher. Obviously, you can't control union contracts, but a significant fraction of the total number of employees are non-union. A lot of them, frankly, need a 3% raise to stay above the new state minimum wage requirement, which is going up to $13 an hour in the new fiscal year. And we have a lot of our employees that make less than that. So those have to stay at 3% because we have to make minimum wage. But a lot of employees make enough that they don't technically need that. And the Board of Selectmen made a decision to recommend a 3% raise, but ultimately that is your final, decision. It's not a big savings. The only place where there would be significant savings is if you reduced either the town clerk or the registrars, because those both got much larger than 3% raises. But that was due to, frankly, both those groups made an argument that their workload had increased fairly considerably, and therefore, given the number of hours they were ending up working, that was appropriate. And the Board of Selectmen agreed to that, but again, ultimately, they are elected officials and that's your decision. So, I mean, in total, you're looking at somewhere around $4,600 in savings if you elected to do all of that. You're going to piss people off, but I hate to say it, but that is life. If we have to, we have to. And the other thing to note is that the Board of Selectmen elected not to build in any raises to the budget for members of the MEIU bargaining units, which are up for negotiation this year. I had originally built in a 3% raise for them, but the Board of Selectmen decided to zero out that raise. So more than likely, after we're done with collective bargaining, our employee costs are going to go up somewhat because we're going to have 3 employees that are probably not going to end up with a 0 raise. So the maximum you could potentially save is $4,600 if you do that. But, again, that comes with some downsides. Number 4.
What department is in that MEIU employees?
Say again?
What department is in the MEIU employees?
So the MEIU is the assessor, the assistant assessor, and the tax collector.
I look at 3, this is my opinion, so everybody can have their own opinion, but we have so few town employees, and employee turnover is an expensive proposition of getting a new body and new training, and it's not easy. With the town comes the longevity. The longevity brings some value to us because people know how things have been done and things like that. So for the cost savings, I don't think we get a lot out of it. And we make potentially more problems down the road. Motivated employees do a good job for our townspeople, so to speak. Disgruntled employees just make things harder.
I agree, and I'm sure that, the meaner we get with employees, that affects retention. And if you look at it objectively, the town of Andover has had an awful lot of turnover. And some of that's inevitable, but, some of that is basically due to decisions, we're making or the boards are making. So that's that. Number 4 is the Board of Selectmen do get a salary.
Does anybody else have a different take on the number 3 than what I do? So I mean,
Diane, I agree with you 100%. I think the town, the Board of Selectmen and Eric have worked on, reducing or kind of overhauling the town employees' jobs already. And then to basically, for the amount of savings, like you said, $4,616, and going to have some very disgruntled employees that we just probably just brought them out of being disgruntled, and then we're going to throw them right back into being disgruntled by a minimal cut, as far as I'm concerned. I agree with you 100%. I would just like to leave it all alone as far as the town employees go.
Yeah, nobody's living high on the hog on these jobs.
Not at all.
No,
Not at
no.
all.
No, they're buying lottery tickets every week.
All right.
Yeah, so same thing with the Board of Selectmen does get a small stipend. The first selectman has elected to zero out his stipend. So he's given that back, and, you know, but the Board of Selectmen do get a stipend a number of years ago because they were pissed at the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Finance did reduce the salary stipend for the Board of Selectmen. So this is actually already starting lower than it used to be. But you have, you know, it is a budget line item. Do I think it's a good idea to knock it down? No, I think you'll get a few people pissed off, and it's probably not worth it. But you asked me to examine everything. So that's examining everything.
So what would it be if we like zeroed it out entirely?
$4,800.
Thank you. All right.
Let's leave it alone.
Just tweaking. All right. Go ahead.
Item number 5, there is a legal line specifically for the assessor's office. And the reason is that the assessor's office gets sued from time to time over their property valuations. Typically, you get the most suits in revaluation years because that's when people see the biggest changes and when they get the maddest. So the budget is increased because we're coming into the next fiscal year is the year in which reval, and we have the most likelihood of getting sued. You can kind of roll the dice. I can't tell you whether we are or we're not. I mean, we got sued 2 or 3 times the last reval year. So it's very definitely a possibility. You could trim that budget a little bit, but you're rolling the dice and hoping that you're not using your full regular legal budget. So you have some slack to transfer money into that legal budget. So that's really the downside. It's risky. Like, we're actually increasing the budget for next year because it's reval, and then we would decrease it the year after when it's not a reval year. So every 5th year that budget gets bumped up for a year. So number 6, we do currently have an alarm in the old firehouse, but since we're only storing vehicles in there, I'm not going to pay to, it's kind of broken at the moment. So I'm not going to plan on fixing it. And I think we can get away with not heating the building at all if we have to. Right now, we're only heating the garage and only minimal enough to keep it warm enough for the vehicles to start. And so the senior drivers don't complain that the vehicles are ice cold when they get in them. I mean, one option is simply we have a diesel vehicle that plugs in. We can just plug the vehicle in and eliminate heating the garage. Not a huge savings, but it is some savings.
Are they already equipped with block heaters?
I think
if they're not, that's going to wipe out any savings you got there. I think installing those.
Yeah, I think I saw a plug coming out of the front. So I think it does have a block heater. I don't know whether it has a tank heater also. But the other thing is, if it's enclosed in a building, even if it's not heated, because 3 sides of the building are, it's an underground structure and only one side is exposed to the weather, it will stay probably above freezing. So you'll probably be able to start the vehicles anyway. You'll have a bigger mold problem going forward, definitely. So I wouldn't want it for a long-term solution, but for a couple of years, you could probably get away with it without anybody, I mean, they'll be unhappy, but they can deal with it.
Eric, as long as you leave those vehicles in that building, they're actually dying a slow death from rot because the building is so damp. And that's been an issue before with our senior vans. What's the timeline of getting those things moved out of there and just parked somewhere down in the Public Works facility? I went by the Columbia Public Works facility today, and they have one or two of their senior vans parked in their salt shed just to get it out of the weather.
Yeah, I think that's
my point is, I mean, we have a lot of room down at Public Works. Yeah, I know we talked about you were working at CIP, that you're working on that, what I think Jay and the guys call the cold storage building. But like I said, that building is so damp, and the vehicles are rotting from the frame underneath up, and you're going to have issues with that later on, whether you can plug them in or not. I think the sooner we get those vehicles out of that building and shut that building down and knock it down or burn it down, I don't know, whatever we got to do, I think the better off we're going to be. It's disgusting. Even if I was a driver, I wouldn't want to walk in there just because of the mold. Gosh,
yeah, and I think I would be happy with going back to parking them outdoors all summer, all spring, summer, and fall. You know, the only reason we've really parked them inside, you know, more than anything else, because it's a pain in the butt to clean the snow off them. You know, and most of our drivers historically have been pretty old. And the last thing I wanted to do was make George, who was 83 years old, you know, try to climb up on a ladder with a brush, you know, trying to clean his vehicle off before he, you know, took somebody for senior transportation. But you're right, we do need an alternative. And I mean, I think really what we're talking about doing is putting up a metal pole barn somewhere on Public Works facility that just has an electrical connection so the vehicles can get plugged in.
That's all you need.
And lighting, yeah.
And I'm sure the guys down there are available to clean the snow off the vehicles. The bus drivers do their buses. I mean, you know, come on. Yeah, it's just, it's been terrible since they've been in there.
I agree. It's not a good situation. I mean, it's a crappy building. It was a crappy building when the fire department got it in, you know, 1927 or whatever, and it hasn't gotten better since.
There's a question for Eddie, as far as the senior / community center. Is there any items going to be made to park the buses close by?
If Ed's not available, I can chime in on that.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, we actually, I talked to somebody today, last Friday, about building a pole barn for my house, and I talked to him about possibly getting a quote. I invited Eric and Scott Person to come, but they couldn't make it to the meeting. But that's what we're kind of looking for, is a 4-bay, high bay pole barn to store the vehicles in, probably down at the town garage.
Awesome.
As part of our overall plan.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, you know, the one that's most years we could probably get away with it is you could probably take some money out of the overtime snow removal budget. Right now, it seems like we're going over budget. I don't have enough historical data to tell you how often we've done it. It's been mild for a while. This year we'll use a little over half of our overtime budget. But we're actually probably, that's an underestimate by a couple $1,000, because some of the money got stuck in the regular overtime, not the snowplow overtime. We can reduce that budget somewhat, but if you kind of take a look at the historical average of how many plowable events you have in Connecticut, you know, even this year, we're well under that number. So it's clear that if we have more than the average historical events for plowable events, we're going to go over in the budget. So it's just a question of what your risk tolerance is for overspending that budget in a snowier year. I look at our current budget and say probably every fifth year we'll be over budget because we're plowing more than average and we're using more salt than average because of conditions. So, but that is a potential area where you could cut, overtime costs for snow removal. The other thing is you could decide that we as a town were willing to accept lower expectations for the road surface. I mean, certainly if you go to a lot of northern areas, there's not an expectation that you're going to be back down to bare surface as soon as we are, and that they'll accept an icier average road condition. So it's a trade-off we can make. I suspect you're going to piss off a lot of people. I mean, I'll sure hear about it if we decide to do it, but that is an option. And I put kind of street lighting in the same category. I mean, personally, I hate street lighting because I'm a big dark sky guy. I want to see the Milky Way. So, I mean, we could cut out every last little bit of street lighting, parking lot lighting, you name it, and I would be in favor of it. But most people wouldn't. And part of our street light budget is the lights out here in front of the town hall, because those are on the street light program, as well as the lighting for our athletic field. I mean, potentially if we whacked it all, we could save about $6,000. But I would also say we're already running a lot less street lighting than we used to, because the previous first selectman had about half the street lighting the town had torn out. So, it's a question of what you're willing to do. I do think there's some safety aspect to providing lighting in key areas, but it is a possible reduction.
Eric, what kind of percentage you're talking about? Because frankly, if every literal street light went away, I wouldn't have any problem with that. I don't particularly like them, and I'm guessing a lot of the residents, if they've got a street light sitting on their corner, 100 feet away from their house, probably don't care for it much either if it's always on. Parking lots at the school in town, that's a little different story. So I'm just wondering kind of if you have a breakout, just ballpark or idea what that.
I think ballpark, the lighting at the town hall and at the ball field is like a third of the total bill, something like that.
Like 2,000.
Yeah, something in that range.
What other streetlights do we have?
They're up at some corners and things, I think it's
like intersections and things like that.
Yeah, there's a few spots. We don't have a ton of street lighting, but we do have some that we're paying for on an ongoing basis. I can't tell you what all the locations are. I would have to look that up.
In past years, Eric, in past years, and the previous administration chopped, like you said, over half of the streetlights we had, but it was a recommendation that every intersection have a street light, and along with the school, the town office building, the fire station, who has our own built-in street lights, but mainly it was every intersection had a light for safety and safety reasons, and then they took out probably 2/3 of them as a cost-saving measure, and I recall that people were actually complaining that they lost their lights just for security reasons. So that's another side that we have to look at. But yeah. I'm going back a few years, but every intersection in town was lit up.
Do we pay for the lights at intersections to state roads? Like when you get down to 316 and Boston Hill's a state road, right?
I don't think so. I think the state does their own.
Okay.
In that type of thing. But I'm talking about the town roads.
Right, the town roads.
Yeah, and I mean, I can remember growing up at Andover Lake when I was a young kid. There, they put a streetlight in front of our house because it was a somewhat dangerous corner. People park on both sides of the road, and because it's around the lake, and but that streetlight actually lit it up so they could see the cars parked and so on and so forth. So it seemed to make it a lot safer, and the people liked it. So that's just my little dip for.
Hard to compromise with safety. Do you know what I mean? So
that's what they're used for. And like I said, the previous administration cut those probably almost either in half or 2/3, just to save whatever amount of money he saved. And it wasn't much.
Yeah, and we certainly have had an awful lot of complaining by the school bus drivers because there's no longer a street light that illuminates where the bus parking area is.
Right.
And we've gone back and forth with them trying to get DATCO to pay for it.
That actually is one that's been removed. That was removed by the previous administration.
Yeah, believe me, I've heard all about that.
Oh yeah.
So that's one. It is possible. I did have a conversation today with Wally, and I asked him for what would happen if we gave them an across the board cut in their fire commission budget of 3%, which would be around $4,200 in savings. And he grumbled a lot and said, you know what, if they absolutely had to do it, they could do it. But he couldn't give me any idea about what exactly they would cut for it.
Hey, Eric, if I can, and I was going to speak on it when you were complete, when you were done. We meet Monday night, this upcoming Monday night, and I was going to recommend to the other board. We have a zero increase budget to begin with on our operating budget. The Capital Improvements Committee basically originally said, well, put in for $100,000 of capital equipment, which would have purchased 3 of our 5 priority capital pieces of equipment. We did that based on their recommendation, and then the Board of Selectmen cut that by $50,000. So now we're down to $50,000 in capital, and that's our only increase of our fire commission budget over last year. And basically, our original request was for the battery operated jaws of life tools, because our hydraulic tools are becoming obsolete and we can't get parts for them and things like that. And I had a discussion with Chief Mike today, and he said no matter what, we do need those that set of jaws, which was I think $36,000 or $37,000 total. So I was going to recommend that we give back maybe the $10,000 or $12,000 in capital that we had requested and just purchase those jaws of life tools. So how do you cut a zero increase budget? And we spend a budget right down to I think we gave back $2 this past year or something. I mean, with an increase in training and increase in everything else, and increase in calls that we've had due to COVID, plus everything else, we have a major influx of new members. We finally got some young people that we're going to have to outfit and train, eventually. So there's not a lot of room for us to cut a zero increase budget. And I'm speaking operating, other than the capital, and just cut it right down to that one item, which we originally requested. Right, Eric? I mean, you wouldn't. You're part of that on CIP, and recommended we do the up to 100,000, and then it got cut. So,
right.
What do you want us to do?
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, none of these cuts come without consequences, real consequences to real programs. And the library is the same way. If you cut the library budget, the library is, about 75% salary, and it's, the majority of the rest of their budget is the cost of books. So if you cut their budget, they're going to buy less books because they won't have the money to buy the books, and they're going to be open less hours. And that's really, what you're looking at. Same thing with the rec commission budget. I mean, you can cut the rec commission budget. I mean, it's not a given that we have to supply a porta potty to the athletic fields. And it's not a given that we have to supply a porta potty to the rail trail / Andover Museum. You know, they're really nice amenities. It's a great thing to have, but that can be cut. And you can also cut their programming and just tell them to do, you know, less concerts, you know, cancel their Easter egg hunt or whatever, you know, make them live with a tighter budget. Would they be happy about it? No, they'd be pissed at me, but you can do that. You know, so what I'm saying is if you did all of that, you can get down to what we talked about, which is a $75,000 budget reduction, you know, without cutting into capital or doing major service impacts. You know, beyond that, you know, if you want to leave capital in place, you know, your only real options are getting rid of the resident state trooper or, you know, going after the library in a big way, neither of which I'm in favor of, because I think those are both public amenities we really ought to be providing to the community. But, you know, I also understand that not everybody's in agreement with that. You know, your mileage may vary. The other question is, can we preload expenses from this year into next year? The two pockets of money that we know we're going to have are the money allocated for the software transition, that's $30,000, and what's left for the COVID relief funding, which is about 20,000 ballpark. But probably one of those two we're going to tap to pay for the improvement to the Veterans Monument. You know, I don't want to necessarily talk about it now because it's still preliminary, but we will have the ability to apply some money from the unexpended fund balance to offset our capital expenses. From the original capital plans that were presented and approved by CIP, the Board of Selectmen already cut $25,000 from the Fire Department Equipment Fund, $25,000 from the Tree Removal Fund, and $15,000 from the Building Maintenance Fund. So let's talk about what would have to happen if you wanted to pursue cuts to capital. I mean, the first thing is the town agreed to lease to purchase the loader 2 years ago. So we're still paying that off. I mean, you could potentially decide that that should come out of the Public Works Equipment Fund now, which it didn't in the past, and put that $32,000 lease payment in the Public Works Capital Equipment Fund, which would decrease the Capital Equipment Fund basically by $32,500. You could choose not to fund the multi-building fund, which is what we're paying for the new community center / senior center. You could take some money out of the tree trimming budget. You know, I hate to advocate that because we've had so many trees come down on town roads this year and we've had so many resulting closures. But I mean, you know, we certainly don't have enough money in our budget to do all the tree trimming we need. You know, I look at it and I say, whatever you give me for the tree trimming budget, that's what we'll use. So you can't cut that radically, but you could cut that a little bit. You could cut some more money from the Fire Department Equipment Fund, but we're not going to be able to, the cuts the Board of Selectmen put in there still left it just enough money to fund the 3 capital items that CIP approved. If you cut it further, you're basically telling the fire department, you know, you're only going to get 1 or you're only going to get 2 of the items that CIP approved. But again, you can do it. You know, you can cut money from the road improvement fund. $20,000 off of that basically reduces about a half mile of shim, crack seal, chip seal. And you could cut money from the building maintenance fund. The Board of Selectmen cut that from 60,000 to 45. You could cut some additional money, and that's just means we do less. You know, we've got a couple $100,000 in projects that we practically need to do. So we simply knock them off at the rate at which we're funded. And if you cut, you know, $5,000 from that fund, you're still probably above, you know, your building. You're still probably able to put enough into the buildings that they're not continuing to decline. You're just not making things better. So that's pretty much what I've got in terms of recommendation. Obviously, I don't want to cut the town budget at all. I think I've actually kind of given you a pretty reasonable, you know, pretty fair budget to begin with. But I get that you're looking at a pretty significant budget increase, and you may decide as a board that we need to make those cuts. So that's what I'm presenting to you.
I think the town budget has been pretty lean coming into this year. I think we've done a really good job taking a lot of the fat out, and everybody's been very proactive and only asking for what they need and not inflating the numbers. I mean, I think that we can get the savings from maybe reducing that position and combining some duties with the building, but a lot of the other stuff is really going to hurt a lot of things. It may not be worth it in the end. I just don't see a lot of opportunities here. I think we can maybe get $50,000, but that's it. I don't think you're going to get any more out of the town. You know, we actually increased the town budget by adding that AHM stuff back into the town, which it didn't have last year. So we kind of like, you know, we had something that came up unexpected that we didn't anticipate, you know, so.
Yeah, we save it on the school side, so.
Right, but we're sticking it in the town side, so, you know.
Yeah.
So.
All right, I appreciate the work here, Eric. I think it looks like a reasonable, you know, ways to look at this. I'm curious about the fire department capital fund. Maybe Kurt would know, but so Eric, you mentioned 3 pieces of equipment that had been approved by the CIPC. Yep. And the Board of Selectmen already reduced the capital request by $25K. Did that still allow enough to cover those 3 pieces?
Yeah, barely.
Okay.
Yes.
And what are the 3 pieces that we're talking about?
The first was the Jaws of Life.
Right. Which.
The second was a commercial washer because there's a requirement that after fires, your turnout gear is washed. Right. We don't really have a washing machine capable of doing that.
And dryer.
And dryer. And for the life of me, I can't think of what the third thing was.
The 27 going on 28-year-old air compressor for SCBA.
Right. The device they use to repressurize the.
Oh, you refill your Scotty packs there with that. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
That was the company Shipmans who got they were the low bidder on that part. They are taking the older one in trade, so they gave us a pretty decent trade in towards the new one. So they were the low bidder out of 3.
Okay.
And I would remind you that, you know, the budget for the fire department, the capital budget, was again looking at what the fire department presented, you know, for a longer term, you know, a 10-year, like this is all the equipment, this is all the stuff we need in the 10 years, and divide it out and say each year's chunk of that is roughly $100,000. So that was the original, the value that we stuck in there originally was, you know, essentially what our long-term replacement costs for their equipment was broken down into years.
Now, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong. What was the balance that we had after the trailer was purchased for the and the UTV? What was the balance of the equipment fund?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I think it's right around 30,000.
That's what I thought. Now, and then it was recommended CIP to put $100,000 into the account this year, right? And like 125 or 150 into the town equipment fund.
Correct.
But didn't the selectmen cut our fund by 50?
No, they cut your fund by 25 this year. Last year they cut it by 50. This year they only cut it by 25.
Am I mistaken? I thought they cut it at one of their budget workshops. They cut the allocation to 50 instead of 100.
No, they cut it to 75 instead of 100.
All right, well that's even worse. So that's
no, they cut it to 75, not they cut it 75.
Oh, okay. That's where I was a little confused on that because we were told it was chopped by 50 grand. So
no, it was only chopped by 25. And it was chopped by 25 because they did the math on the stuff that you had the bids for. Right. And they said if they basically zeroed that fund out and spent every dime in it, you could still buy all three of those items this year. You would just have zero in your fund when they were done.
Well, of course, it'll be up to the board on Monday night, but I think we can get by with the one purchase for this year. And whatever savings that would be. But that'll be up to Wally and the rest of the board on Monday night.
But that doesn't take it away from still having a legitimate need, and we're gonna have to buy it next year, right? So I mean,
correct.
It's not like it's luxury items that we're buying.
No,
right?
they're not.
And Diane, that is why I kind of put operating cuts first. As much as I hate to do it, the town has tended to always balance the budget by just cutting capital, which works, but you just keep running up a bigger deficit in capital. So you're not, in the long run, you're not saving anything. You're just pushing that expense off to future taxpayers from.
Rather have a plan and live by a plan and say, in 10 years, we're going to need X. As long as we're conservative in our planning, we need to put aside the money every year so we can do what we have to do. Because we're never going to be able to come up with a chunk of money unless we bond.
That's pretty much what the CIP has been doing, Diane, is actually devising that plan for all departments in town. And but here we are looking at a 7.5% tax increase, and we're just looking for every penny we can to try to save.
I mean, we're trying to live in our means. Do you know what I mean? It's just
right.
And just buy the necessities, and I think we're kind of there.
Yeah.
Okay, can I just mention the poor little library? 75% of their budget is benefits and wages, 25% is operating cost. You gave them 3% raises, and you want us to cut 3%, which means we have to cut the raises plus more.
Right.
Well, actually, Linda, we can't cut your wages because most of your employees.
You can't cut it, but we've got to make up the difference out of our budget for the wages. So.
I'm being very blunt. That cut would hurt.
Yeah, if it were 3% off just the operating, it would be easier than, because like 75% of the budget is salaries. I don't know where would come from.
Right, you'd be open less hours. You're right. I mean, that would hurt.
Right.
There's no question. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it and saying it would be easy for the library to absorb that. You're not. It's going to hurt. It's going to be less hours and less stuff, you know, for the public. I'm not saying I'm in favor of it, but you asked me to say what are the possibilities. So that's what I'm trying to present to you.
Okay,
I'm
so
not-
now are we asking the elementary Board of Ed for 3% cut too, or anything like that?
We asked the elementary board of, I mean, we asked Valerie, I asked Valerie at our last meeting to do an exercise like this. I don't think I requested a specific figure. I said, can you, oh no, we did actually. We said, can you go and do something? I thought we asked for
75,
80 or
100,
100.
and 125.
Yeah.
And,
what
you know,
sounds-
along the lines of what we got from our past superintendent in the past when we were facing a crunch, and we
Right,
said,
I
okay, give
remember
us
that, but
scenarios.
I don't,
We haven't gotten a response yet, but we did ask.
Yeah.
And Mark was
To be
talking
clear,
earlier about following up on that.
Yeah, these are just options. We haven't decided. We're
This is
not
not,
any reductions yet.
I mean, the whole point was to lay it out, and so we could look at it and say, ugh, we're not gonna ask the library for that. You know, that's the point. We're not, this isn't like gonna
This is
happen necessarily. We're working through it.
yeah.
This was good for me because it showed me how lean we are on the operating, you know, and on the town side. Really, we are pretty
We
lean.
have been for years now. There's not a lot
No,
there. I mean, it's really that first option is great, and then after that, it quickly gets into diminishing returns.
Right.
Right. I mean, you know, if you think about it, you know, we're largely a salary driven organization. You know, much of that is already basically part of a union contract. So other than laying off employees, and, you know, we will have, by the time we do that, you know, we will have reduced by 3 the number of people, you know, with full benefits at the town hall, which that already comes as a cost. I mean, you know, it comes as a cost in retention, you know, and it comes as a cost in, you know, labor hours you have available. And some of it we can absorb, some of it, you know, but it's not free either, you know?
Right, the only other thing is to say the town hall is only open 3 days a week. You can do that, I mean.
Yeah, you know, no,
Yeah.
I understand, and, you know, and I've said that to the board, because, you know, one of the things that's almost problematic is we're kind of trying to make individual deals with individual departments and right size them all. But you can't do that. And now pretty much every office in the town hall is gonna have different hours they're open. So before you used to be able to walk into town hall and the majority of employees would be there. And now it's like, oh, well, this person's here, but that person's not. And we don't have coverage in this office, but we did this morning. And, you know, and that's an inconvenience to the public. But, you know, unfortunately, I think that's something we have to do. We can't, you know, maybe we're at the point where we can't afford to have the office fully staffed, you know, all the time we're open, you know, and maybe in the future we do start talking about going down to 3 days a week being open as a town hall. Or 2 days, or 1 day, you know?
There's a lot of
Not pretty.
things to consider now. You know, it's not. And I think ultimately when we get some feedback or make some decisions about the school, we're going to have to go through the town in addition line by line with these concepts or these options and start and basically finalize that, you know, that budget. Yeah, there's a lot to consider here. Thanks, Eric. I think we're probably good with this unless anybody else has any more questions. Sherry?
Yeah, I just want to let you know that I know that the superintendent is working on that list for you. And she has been over the past few days, so I'm fairly confident that you'll get something soon.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Good to
and I
hear.
know
Thank you.
She may need to go with the Board of Ed on that too and talk, really
Yeah.
talk to them a little bit. So
Yeah,
it's not a trivial task, and we
no,
that either on Eric or on the part of the school district to dig back in and try to figure out what the impacts are all the time. But it's unfortunately just got to be done. So
yeah, I know she's working with the board chair
okay, good.
too on a lot of it. Yeah, so
That's kind of what we figured. All right, thank you. That's good to know.
you're welcome. No problem.
Okay, anybody else have anything for Eric on this, or my thinking is that once we kind of get some more feedback from the school, we have to put the rubber to the road and start looking at this. We've gotten a lot of feedback from members of the Board of Selectmen's office. We've got some digesting to do of where the RAM budget's going to end up being. We haven't gotten firm numbers from them yet, but that's going to have to happen. Does anybody want to have any more discussion either on the town budget or anything specific to the schools or RAM at this point?
RAM did say today that they were going to take all the AHM fees out of their budget.
Yeah.
So the budget spreadsheet you had from me today already has that taken out of their budget. No, it's my calculation for taking it out, not theirs, but that's going to be pretty close to what their budget as they've agreed to so far.
Yeah.
Will they make further changes? I don't know, but that should be, practically correct.
Yeah, you might be a couple thousand off, but
Yeah.
okay, well, we do have obviously several more budget workshops scheduled. And we are going to have to, really put the rubber to the road, I think, at the next couple. Hopefully we'll have the feedback from the school then. We've got some pretty solid feedback from Eric. We're going to have to go department by department, line by line, I think, really, and just, say, yes, we're good. Let's make an adjustment here. We move down. It's going to be fairly complex, really difficult. So hearing no more discussion on the budget regarding this, I'll just review. We do have upcoming budget workshops scheduled over the next 3 Wednesdays, the 31st, the 7th, and the 14th. So a lot of work to do, and we'll try to get this all lined up and then I think really. Anything else from the board? I do want to say that they're the week of the 14th. It probably doesn't really need to be said now, but just as a heads up, my company's trying like heck to get me over to Germany for 2 weeks, and I really doubt whether that's going to happen due to the COVID restrictions. But I may not be available for that meeting, or it's going to be tough for me to potentially meet it. But I'll do everything I can to make sure I do it remotely if I am in fact over there. But anything else from the board on the budget?
No, I just think we have a hard job, and I thank everybody for their hard work, and we just gotta.
Yeah, I think it would behoove us all to kind of do everything we can over the next 7 days. I know I'll be spending time this weekend to really try to digest all of the input we've gotten from various sources, the updated budget information from the schools, and really kind of understand where we are and what we think can be done. So we're coming down to it here, really, I think. Okay.
Is there anything the board wants from me specifically for the next meeting? Anything I can provide you to make your lives easier?
The only
money
thing,
tree?
A couple $1 million.
yeah,
You got a money tree?
Buy a lottery ticket? No.
the only thing I would say is that if we do get updated information from RAM, with the final number, then I would plug that in. The AES one, we may want to do a little what ifs, but if they come back with a full blown budget revision, then obviously we can plug that in. But I suspect we'll probably get something more along the line of what you did. So let's, we'll kind of wait and see. But other than updating that Excel file with an updated version, I can't think of anything, Eric.
Okay.
I mean, my goal when we get to the end where we're making the final decision is to have a final, like you said, Excel file with the correct numbers in it so we can see how everything lies. I don't want to have 10 versions of something and trying to piece and stuff together.
Yeah, it gets complicated. And I'll try to make sure I work with Eric to take that task on to make sure we've got as clean a file and as updated information as possible in advance of the meetings.
Sure. And then the only other thing I think may change from the town side is in a week. It's possible we'll have a memorandum of understanding in place for the combined position, in which case I will build that cost reduction into the budget so you can see exactly what it looks like. And the other thing is, as soon as we have the updated information on the actual healthcare costs, we will adjust the line items for that also. We just don't have the final numbers. And I know about what they're going to be. It's not a big total reduction, but I don't want to do it and then go back in a week later and have to change it again by a few $100s each. So I'm waiting till we have the actual numbers.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so hearing no further topics brought to the fore for the budget, let's move on to agenda item 9, which is approval of the meeting minutes. 9A is the approval of meeting minutes for Wednesday, February 24th, the regular meeting minutes. Anybody want to make a motion to approve those?
Do all three in one motion?
No, sorry.
I'm making a motion to approve those minutes.
Yeah, we probably could actually. I'm not sure exactly on the rules.
I don't know if we can or not. I don't. Let's ask them the question.
Let's do them one by one. So Diane moves to approve the meeting minutes from Wednesday, February 24th. Kurt seconds. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Item 9B, Wednesday, March 3rd, special meeting minutes. A motion to approve or amend?
Approve. Motion.
Okay. Kurt moves to approve the meeting minutes. Any seconds?
Second.
Diane seconds. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. And the last but not least, the Wednesday, March 17th special meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve those? I'm looking at you, Linda.
Okay.
Everybody got to take a turn.
You're at the top of my screen. So, all right. So Linda moves to approve those. I have a second.
I think it's my turn. I second.
Our supporting actor, Rob England, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Agenda item 10 is the liaison reports. Do we have any? We've already discussed some of the CIPC activity.
We already talked about the community center, so we kind of.
Right, yeah,
Talked about AHM.
yeah.
I'm good, and if this drags on much longer, I'm just gonna have to duck off. I have to get my mother to the airport in the early morning. I gotta be out of the house for 6 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
I'm dragging here.
Understood, yeah. Okay, well, I think we'll move on to agenda item number 11. Thanks, Rob. If you do, we still have a quorum, so. Board open discussion. Does anything else have to go to the front of the board? Anybody have any topics to bring forth? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item 12, which is public speak. Amanda, do you want to go around the horn?
Sure. Sherry Holmes?
Nope, I don't have anything right now. I'm fading fast, so I gotta
Yeah.
move on.
Thank you.
Thank
Ed
you.
Sirisley?
He's sleeping already.
Ed Sirisley, are you still with us?
Wake up, Ed.
All right, moving on. Joanne Hebert?
Oh, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Murray?
I won't keep this long, but I want to comment not as a selectman, but as a private citizen. I've sat through this meeting tonight and I've sat through many meetings, many board ed meetings, and Eric's proposals tonight, cutting staffing, cutting our fire equipment, limiting concerts, removing the bathrooms from the ball fields and the rail trail, impacts to our snow plowing, senior transportation impacts by moving the vehicles out and cutting the heat from the old senior center, cuts to road work. To me, it's just very minor things that we can do, but it's going to impact so many people negatively. As a selectman, I do see the need that we need to do for road work. I mean, I am a cyclist, and when you travel these roads in town in a car, you're kind of isolated and you don't really get to see the condition of the roads. But when you're on a bike and you're looking, and you see what dire situations some of our roads are in, we can't let this stuff go any longer. It's got to get fixed. I mean, it just can't keep continuing. And we need to put some attention to that. I know you guys have a hard job. I know everybody on the Board of Finance has a hard job, but we really need to concentrate on this school budget. I mean, even some Board of Education members have even admitted it's significantly padded. I mean, I've had a couple of people coming to me with concerns about, we have certified teachers that are certified with master's degrees teaching at the preschool level, where we only need state requirements only are associate's degrees in some, in some classes that need to be taken. I was actually mocked at a Board of Education meeting for my, request for snacks. I mean, the request of why the snacks cost was so high and the supplies costs were so high at $35,000. The cost for a liaison were so high. And if you check your emails that I sent you, I mean, we have a proposal right now for 3 kindergarten classes with 10 students in paras. And if you look around at adjoining districts, I mean, that is not, it's not happening in any other district right now. We're the only district that's proposing that in the COVID gap. The school needs to come in with some sensible cuts. And I don't think 150,000 or I don't think 200,000 is going to do it. I think at a minimum, they need to come in at a zero budget. That just needs to happen. That's the only way we're ever going to get anything passed in this town and get the infrastructure improvements that we need. I'm just asking you to please, let's not settle on 150,000. Let's not settle on 200,000. We need to make the hard decisions. The town has gone to the limits of, we've cut everything that we possibly can. And the school board really hasn't done that. And we need to really push them to make sure that they examine every line item and make sure that everything that we're spending is equitable to the taxpayers, because the things that I found, they really aren't, and we really need to do something. And that is your power to do that. Send a message to the Board of Education to please go back and come in with a zero-based budget. And that's all I got to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Leanne Hutchinson?
Hi.
Hi, Leanne. Go ahead.
Hi. No, I just this minute signed in. So if you're in public speak, it's just a coincidence. So I don't have anything to comment on right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Scott Person?
Yeah, all I want to say is that Jeff has said everything that I was going to say. I would mimic him. So I feel the same way that Jeff does about this budget this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. I believe that's it.
Yeah, it looks like it. Okay, thank you, everybody. I know it's been a long one, and it doesn't. We've gone through a lot of detail. We haven't really. It may not seem like we're making that much traction, but we are getting there, I think. So we'll move on to item 13, which is adjournment. I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Diane, motion to adjourn. She's holding her hand up. Can she get it up there? Rob seconds. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Aye.
No abstention?
Good
Okay.
night.
Good night, all.
Everybody, appreciate
Bye,
it.
everybody.
Good night.